Good morning. Indeed, live we are. God, I've still got bed hair. And unusually, I've actually got a handful of people watching already because during the countdown, I think it was Samar Faye, somebody anyway, let me just check, I'll get it right, raided into me, or I haven't got it on my screen. But so thank you so much for the raid. Good morning. Oh, it was you, wasn't it? It was Angstase who raided. That's right, I remember now. Thank you very much. I've only just sort of woken up and I haven't written for ages. I've been having a bit of I struggle with mental health, and there's been, this month is a couple of anniversaries of people passing quite recently that kind of mess with the head a little bit. So it's taken me a little while to get mentally back into the right place to want to do it. And there's absolutely no point writing if you're not in the right place, because what you write will be utter garbage, or what certainly is when I do it anyway. So I set myself a goal of writing, or editing, should I say, to the end of chapter 20 of my work in progress, which is called Empress of the Trees, which is an ecological thriller about trees giving humans... Right, yeah. Is that today? Yesterday. Yeah, no, it does. And it does affect you, particularly if it's recently, yeah. So, bless. So so I couldn't, but I'm in a better place today. I'd set myself a target of getting to the end of chapter 20 by the end of the month. I've done up to the end of chapter 16. I don't think I'm going to quite hit the target I've set myself, but that's absolutely fine, because it's better that it's quality than quantity, and I'll get something done today. Because basically, so my editing process is twofold. So I do a detailed screen read through a couple of times on each chapter, and then when I'm happy with it, I then physically print it and do the same edit from paper. And I have actually screen edited up to the end of chapter 20. But what I find is I do notice more on paper. So maybe I'll get this edited today. We'll see. I'll certainly get something edited today. Let me just check I can see you guys are able to message me. Let's just check my messages. Yep, that's all working. So yeah, thank you for the raid. I'm just going to crack on, really. So I reached a natural break in the narrative at the end of chapter 16, where the stuff it had been building up to has happened, and now we're going to see quite slowly what the consequences of everything are. So let me just open the correct media file. It's a word processing document. Second draft chapters, chapter 17. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Right. Any questions from anybody, please feel free. One of the reasons I do it on here is I'm quite happy to be interrupted and have a natter. Oh, one last thing. That barcode leads to all my social media, and one of the social media is a Discord server, which is currently, which is there. And there is actually an audio channel open now. So you just heard it go on. So if any... Oh, that's good. So I'm trying to remember, have I spoken to you before? I'm guessing from the 8-hour time difference that you are probably West Coast USA kind of area. But yeah, as I was saying, so if anyone would like to physically talk to me, they can dial in, they can join the Only in Summer. Okay. Just dial into the Discord server. There's an audio channel which you can talk to me on. The only downside is your voice will appear on here, so only do it if you're willing to actually have your voice on the stream. Right, so anyway, I'm going to go into my book. Arizona Doesn't Change for Daylight. Oh, I was in Arizona a couple of weeks ago. I have a friend who graduated from the ASU, and yeah. In fact, I might even have some... Oh no, I can't really put... Well, I could put pictures. I won't put pictures of her up, but I could put a picture of bits from the ceremony up, because it was a really quite impressive ceremony. Let me find my photos. He says, where are they? Oh, they're there. Right, hang on. So, for example, that was from right at, oh, wrong button, right at the end of the graduation ceremony. Oh no, that's allowed. Yeah, so this was the graduation at the graduation ceremony, right at the end when obviously all the balloons were dropping. So the guys in the middle are, I think this was the doctor. I can't remember which ceremony this was. There was a couple that you could go to. Let me find it more, but it was just it was a really enjoyable day. Um, I've got some videos somewhere. Will that play through here? Probably. Let me just go to media type videos and scroll down to the bottom. Hang on. Well, they don't have balloons. Yes. Yeah. So it was a very interesting ceremony. What I particularly, but I've for hearing people sing words and singing music at the cost of distorting the words. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I think what was most interesting about it was how every because there was an awful lot of overseas students at that graduation, and nearly all of the speeches that were done were about kind of overcoming what seems to be happening in the country at the moment. But it was really cool. Let's see if I can find. There was another bit where they actually, at the launch of the ceremony, where oh, this is it. This is so cool. They had a Scottish. They had like a band come in and just at the beginning, but it was a proper like Scottish. Oh, let me just play it rather than explain.
Stephen Talk, New College Associate Dean Luis Mendoza, New College Associate Dean Vernon Morris, New College Assistant Dean Tommy Wetzel, College Marshal and Convocation Speaker Charles St. Clair, School of Humanities Arts and Cultural Studies Director Julia Serial, School of Interdisciplinary Forensics Intern Director Luis Mendoza, School of Mathematics and Natural Sciences Intern Director Wai Shu, School of
Oh, end of video. It was genuinely very, very, very impressive. And oh, okay. Is that why she got the round of applause right at the end there? Yeah, so I genuinely, I really enjoyed it. I was not, I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, I've never been to an American graduation ceremony before. Just realised I'm on the wrong screen. Sorry, but yeah, it was very good. Really enjoyed it, and much more than I thought I would. Morning, Angel Faye. How are you? Yeah, so that was the graduation ceremony in Phoenix, and there are actually several running concurrently. They actually had to. Yeah, it's been a while. My brain hasn't been in the right place to do this, and I have learnt over the years that it's better not to force yourself. To be honest, so I haven't. So yes, so I'm going to do a little bit of work on this chapter today, and we'll just see how it goes. Yeah. Cool. Right. So I'm literally going to dive straight in with chapter 17. Let me get the right screen for that, which is that one. So the way I work, unfortunately, is I'm actually working from paper, so I won't be scrolling around on the screen unless I need to make an alteration. Apologies, so you won't necessarily be able to follow me on the screen. So this is the part 3 of the book. There was supposed to be 4 parts. There ended up being 5 because the epilogue was too perfunctory. So I added stuff to it. I've just realised my battery on my laptop isn't as good as it ought to be. Let me just give it some power. There we go. Right, so part 3, Scald. Chapter 17, Consequences. Marianne woke curled in a ball at the side of the bed and was thus able to get up without disturbing Ronnie, who was facing the now extinguished fire with the duvet around herself. Marianne bent down intending to kiss her exposed forehead, but then, not wanting to disturb her, thought better of it. Instead, they watched her gentle breathing. They watched her gentle breathing for a few moments, smiled, and exited the room. Once in the kitchen, Marianne plated up a continental platter of meat and cheese, chopped some fruit, and put plain yoghurt into a bowl. They put croissants and cinnamon twists into the oven, and as soon as someone entered, in this case Oakley, they turned it down to a low heat to keep them warm. "How are you feeling this morning?" asked Oakley. "A bit empty," Marianne confessed. Oakley nodded and went and stood in the snug, standing by the windows and looking out into the forest at the front of the house. He'd made himself a black coffee and stood there brooding. Strange, isn't it? "Strange, isn't it?" he asked. "To think those trees would usually be helping to create the oxygen we rely on, and now they're not." Marianne joined him. "It doesn't seem entirely real," they said. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Initially badly," admitted Marianne. "I ended up in Ronnie's room." Oakley nodded and took another sip of coffee. "If you want me to put 2 single beds into one of the rooms, if you want to make the arrangement more permanent, let me know." Without waiting for an answer, he went and helped himself to croissants and filled a couple with ham and cheese. I'm going to add the word warm. So in this case, you see free over brave. Yes, and that was very much, sorry, going back to what you were saying, and that was very, very much the theme of this. So you had nearly all of the speeches were talking about what's happening in the country at the moment. And there was an absolutely lovely moment during one of the speeches where somebody who's like very high up in the university infrastructure turned around. She was just doing a speech, and she said, "When I actually came to this university, at the time I was an immigrant, and a couple of people clapped, and then more people and more people, and it became just." From her expressing that she was an immigrant that had made something of herself in the country, and effectively lived the American dream. She didn't say that, but that's what's happening. It just started as not a slow clap, but just a couple of people clapping. Then more joined in, and as I said, it became a standing ovation, and it was really, really moving. And it kind of says to me that people who really understand the American dream understand that immigrants are a part of it, and they are not a problem, and they add to the country. And yeah, there are other people that would disagree with that. Unfortunately, they are currently running the country. But there you go. So it was very, very moving, and nearly all of the speeches given by the academics referred in code. They didn't say it outright to what was happening with the government in the country at the moment. And yeah, it gave me hope, to be honest with you, because from an outside perspective, it just looks like America's turning into this place where somebody who isn't American, or even a white American, if we're really honest about it, isn't welcome. And this made me realise that that's actually not the case, that not everybody thinks like that. So, yeah. to the warm. Yeah, for some mysterious reason, whenever ice immigration comes into the... Well, because people have literally... I mean, there's at least a couple of cases where people who legitimately are there have disappeared. It's just awful. And I do worry about my friend because she's actually Chinese. They are very much the bad guy, according to the administration anyway, at the moment. And I wonder at her decision to settle in a country that you could argue doesn't want her at the moment, and hopefully that won't be. Interesting. Yeah. Supplies are a bit low. It is. It's just a sad. And I say I don't understand why my friend wants to live there at the moment because um, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a necessarily safe or stable environment for her. She doesn't want to live in China, I think, is the reason. But I'm not convinced America is the best place for her. But that's not my. I'm sure she won't watch this, so it's not my place to tell her that. And she needs to come to her own conclusions. Supplies are a bit low, said Marianne. I thought we could be back this afternoon. I was going to place an order yesterday evening from the hotel. Would you mind if I drove into Kendal and did a real shop? Not at all, said Oakley. Take Ronnie with you. She will appreciate the distraction. I think that would be better. That had a contraction. Yeah. Thank you. They could hear Farnborough stomping down the stairs in the hall, and a few moments later he swung into the kitchen and sat down in the snug. Any chance of a fry-up, old boy? He asked Marianne. They rolled their eyes. Every chance, they said through gritted teeth. Oakley sat down next to Farnborough, nursing his coffee. Do you do it on purpose? What? Call them a boy? Farnborough stared out of the window, evidently having the same thought about the trees that Oakley had just expressed. He sighed. Sometimes, he admitted. I don't understand all this politically correct nonsense. Now, this is set in 2018. If I was writing it set in today, I would probably put woke instead of politically correct. But I don't think woke was being used like it is now then. I struggle, admitted Oakley, but at least I try. She sees that. Farnborough laughed. They see that. Oakley hastily corrected. The stuff I said in the car didn't help, said Farnborough. At that moment, Marianne appeared with coffee and croissants. Farnborough looked at them, took them, then grabbed Marianne's hand. Fried breakfast, please. He looked up at them, and his expression softened somewhat. Look, my dear, I'm sorry about the awful things I said in the car yesterday. I realise they may have contributed to what happened. My sense of humour gets in the way sometimes. Please forgive me. Marianne looked angry. If you were truly sorry, then you would make the effort not to gender me. I'm not your dear, your love, or anything else. You're really pissing me off. They snatched the hand away. Mushroom and tomatoes? Farnborough nodded. Whatever you think I deserve. An empty plate, then, said Marianne before stomping off. Oakley laughed. That told you. At that moment, Ronnie and Ursula walked in, followed by Woods. Ronnie hugged Marianne before helping them to prepare the fried breakfast. When she sat down to eat, Ronnie noticed she had unconsciously piled unusually large amounts onto her plate. Maybe I'm due an interface soon, she said. Or maybe you're just hungry after a stressful day. Not in the same way and not to the same extent. It was more most progressive issues. Yeah. Well, maybe just hungry after a stressful day, replied Marianne when they delivered a full plate to everyone apart from Oakley. Farnborough was quiet as he ate, and everyone seemed preoccupied by gazing out of the window. Yeah, it wasn't considered it wasn't considered because now it's used as a slur, isn't it? Whereas back then it wouldn't have been. As I say, it's set in 2000. I deliberately set it before the pandemic because I didn't want to have to. And I suppose I could set it now. Actually, it could be set, but it makes no difference when it's set, and I'm not going to change it now. Maybe just. I'm going to interface with the tree here, said Farnborough after he'd finished eating. Give them an idea of how things went. I will also instruct them to let Mackenzie go. He looked at Ronnie's plate. I see you're eating for two, my dear. Idris will want to see you in the next few weeks or so for an update. Mackenzie will also be feeling the urge to eat more, but once I update Idris, she'll release him from his obligations, and that compulsion should subside. There's no full stop there. Ronnie nodded and watched the cloud pass over Marianne's face. Woodsy, I'll be interfacing for at least a couple of weeks, so you might as well have some of that time off. I will call you when you are needed. Very good, sir, replied Woods. Is there anything else you need today? No, old chap, have your breakfast, get the car back to London, then off you pop. Oakley realised that Farnborough was quite a large man. She'd never thought of it in terms of interfacing before, but she supposed it meant that he could just go and communicate with the crew whenever he needed to, rather than putting on weight beforehand like she had to. She grimaced as she realised she was helping herself to a fourth slice of bread and marmalade. Do you want to come shopping with me and Kendall later? Marianne asked Ronnie. That'd be nice, replied Ronnie. Go about lunchtime, suggested Oakley. Find a nice restaurant and have something to eat. I can cook. I can look after myself and Ursula. After breakfast, Farnborough changed into tracksuit and trainers and pulled on his coat. Does anybody need me for anything before I go? When everybody responded that they did not, Farnborough set off for the back door through the utility room. I've let Cockerell, Wright and McRae know to contact you directly if they need anything, Mr. Oakley. He turned back. Does anyone want to watch? It's not every day you get to see someone absorbed by a tree. Right, I'm just going to lose the and see you in the buff. I don't think that's necessary. Ooh, what the hell is that? Would I be willing to hire an American editor? I wouldn't not be willing to hire an American editor. Okay, there is a side of me at the moment that, if I'm brutally honest, because of the impact the current administration is having on the economy of the whole bloody planet, there is a side of me that would probably rather choose to not spend my money in America, but I'm not going to, push a principle too far. And if the best person or the best deal was, it's not. I don't think it's worrying about they can't spell, but it's more of a case of there are differences in spelling between English and American English, and I would worry that I'd suddenly come back with a lot of U's missing. But yeah, I know I'm not. I do like. As I say, I worried about going to Phoenix to my friend's graduation for the same reason, but I had promised my friend that I would go long before the administration started behaving the way it did, and so I'm not. I wouldn't be averse necessarily if it was a good deal, but I think I do worry about supporting an economy that's that's kind of damaging a lot of others. But like I say, you can take a principle too far. And so another example is I've got lots of I work for an airline, and every year we get given a free business class ticket. We only have to pay taxes on the airport taxes and stuff. But I don't know where I want to go, because I'm not working July now. I managed to get July off work. We had too many people and they were offering, and I said yes. But I don't know where to go. There's a few places in the States I would like to go, but well, quite yes. There's as well as the spelling. There's or sidewalk or glasses or all that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's there are differences. But then my friend Tani, who writes the Bow Street Society mystery series, T.G. Campbell, her editor's American, and and she's never come back with, the Britishisms corrected. So I think if they're a good editor and they understand that they're editing for somebody this side of the pond, it should be fine. And also I think Tani's friend, it's a crepida now. I'm going to have to Google that. Excuse me. Or am I just being incredibly obtuse? Bear with me. Oh, it's a kind of sandal. Okay. But I guess it's the place you walk, so maybe that's, yeah. Anyway, there was nothing to do for the rest of the morning, so Ronnie ended up sitting in a quite, that should definitely say quiet. Aha. Hang on, I've lost Google again. Oh, okay. So hang on. Ugh. Crepida, ancient stepping stones. Right, got you. And they take their name from the shoes. Cool. Okay. There's nothing to do the rest of that morning, so Ron ended up sitting in a quiet, not a quite, of the woods at the back of the house with a pad and pencil, something she'd not done for a long time. On returning, she lay on the sofa and read. There were a lot of books in the library, and Oakley had given her a carte blanche to order anything they did not have. I'm going to order anything she wanted, anything. I don't like the way that's worded. No, thank you for joining in. I hopefully catch you in the future. Right. Sleep is winning. It definitely is. Oh, have I talked to you before? You more from where was it? That place that's pronounced differently to how it's written. South of Phoenix. Was that you I spoke to before? Tucson. Was it Tucson area? Probably left it too late to answer that question. Never mind. Yes. Cool. Oh, enjoy your rest. Anyway, there were lots of books in the library. Natalie gave a comfort one did not have one if she wanted. She had the BBC News channel on in the background. For a while, Marion joined her and wrote a shopping list. We can leave about midday. Can we? We can leave. That doesn't sound like a question. So. Can we leave at about midday, they asked. Ronnie said that was fine and then went to the gym and ran 5 kilometres on the treadmill. She had the television on in there as well, scouring the news channels that might link back to the previous day. There was nothing. Ronnie showered and Marianne drove them into Kendal. There were several nice restaurants, so they chose one and spent a pleasant couple of hours eating. Ronnie even volunteered to drive home so that Marianne could have some wine. They walked around the shops together looking at clothes and eventually headed to the supermarket. Ronnie had never seen anyone shop so quickly. Marianne had written the shopping list out in the order the items were located in the store. They completed the task. Had written in the order. They completed the task in just under half an hour, which, given how the contents of the trolley almost spilt over the sides by the time they got to the checkout, was no mean feat. There was a Yakunda at the supermarket, said Ronnie softly in the car on the drive back. First one I've seen in ages. Our first new one I've seen in ages. Who was it? Asked Marianne. The girl on the deli counter, the one the bald man was shouting at. Ronnie stared out of the window, easing the car down a gear as they slowed down for a sharp bend in the road. Somehow I thought there'd be more. She shook her head. I thought there were more good people out there. Marianne glanced at her. You didn't see anyone on your day out to Carlisle? One or two, said Ronnie. I'm disappointed. I thought I'd look down a crowded street and see several. Seems like humanity's not as humane as I'd assumed that it was. They got back just after 6 o'clock to see Oakley pacing around the kitchen. Marianne started packing things away and Ronnie helped. Is everything okay? Asked Ronnie, noting that Oakley seemed to be in worse mood than he had been that morning. Not really, he admitted. I almost phoned you, to be honest. Put the food away. I'm going to say shopping because it's not all food. Put the shopping away. Then meet in the garden room, both of you, please. He walked briskly away. Shall I call Ursula? Ronnie yelled after him. She already knows, he shouted back gruffly. Two of them rushed to put the shopping away and then joined Oakley. The television was paused on a report from the BBC News Channel, a recording from 3 hours ago. Please sit down, he said. They sat on the sofa next to him and Oakley hit the play button on the remote. They heard the last few words of the previous item, then the news anchor turned to a new story. 20-year-old Scottish man has returned to his home in Inverness after going missing in January. Mackenzie Stewart, who disappeared on January the 3rd, contacted his brother out of the blue a few days ago and met him yesterday in Edinburgh. He is now with his grandparents and brother in Inverness. The police say they have done a preliminary interview with him, but as yet have not released a statement. Oakley paused the recording. It was a dreadful picture of Mackenzie, probably from the end of last year, because he looked extremely fat. Marianne and Ronnie barely recognised him. Ah, Ronnie looked from the screen to Oakley. What now? He won't betray us, said Marianne. He promised me that before he left. That's not what's worrying me, said Oakley quietly. What happens if Fiona McRae or Derek Cockle-Wright sees the story and recognise him? Then do some digging. Oh, said Ronnie. She shook her head. Quite, muttered Oakley. Oakley kept an eye on the Scottish news for the rest of the day, watching the Reporting Scotland bulletin at 6:30. Mackenzie was mentioned. The story used the same wording the national broadcaster had used. However, they had a more up-to-date photograph, or maybe it was older, but it was Mackenzie as he looked now. Oakley kept glaring at his phone, and every time he received a phone call or text message, he worried that it would be from one of the ministers. The next morning he did the same, scouring news sources, especially ones local to Inverness. Mackenzie did not get mentioned again on the national news, but Oakley made a point of watching the local news on BBC One Scotland. The bulletins were very short, just headlines really, and nothing more was said. I'm going to say mentioned rather than said on that one. Ronnie spent the morning in the gym after eating a gargantuan breakfast. Marianne joined her for a while and did some weights. With only 4 of them in the lodge now, they both agreed that the place seemed exceptionally quiet. Farnborough had been there for most of the last 2 weeks, and without his ebullient presence, the house seemed almost empty, not to mention the hole in their lives that was Mackenzie. Oakley filed 2 reports that morning on how the ministerial meetings had gone and spent quite a lot of time reading the other accounts that were starting to trickle in from other countries about their appointments. Most said that the responses had not been wholly negative. However, the writer did not believe this meant the government was necessarily going to act in their favour. Many wanted to see proof from the scientific community that levels of oxygen were dropping before they made any firm commitments. There were a handful of countries where the local Arbor Associates representatives had not managed to reduce their minister to the reality of the trees, and they were laughed out of the meetings. In North Korea, the ambassador was arrested and immediately executed. The Russian ambassador had not fared much better, but were at least still alive, reports suggested. Oakley read all of this intelligence on a laptop whilst sitting in the garden room. He had various news channels on in the background, both on the television screen, his iPad and his phone. At 1:30, when Reporting Scotland came on, he sat back and watched it all. Mackenzie was the third news item. There was footage from a press conference held in Inverness. Oakley checked out the website of the local newspaper, the Inverness Courier, which had featured a lot of photographs. Mackenzie could be seen in footage both online and on the local news bulletin, talking about having no idea where he'd been, just finding himself in the Loch Lomond area, very sick, with no memories of how he'd got there. He said he'd been taken in by a kindly older gentleman who wished to remain anonymous, who had fed him and helped him get his strength back, then drove him to Edinburgh so he could meet his brother and go home. To Oakley, it badly looked like a lie covering something up, but the police said they had no evidence of foul play. Mackenzie was in perfect health, and apart from having lost a lot of weight in the months he was missing, was healthier than had been before, and was glad to be home with his grandparents and brother. Marianne came in and watched the news bulletin with him, a sad look on their face. What does this mean for us? They asked. That depends on who else sees all of this coverage, said Oakley uneasily. It's Saturday today, so I'm hoping it means that nobody will. On Monday, Fiona Cray had a busy day. She'd already been on a conference call with Derek Cockrell-Wright and their counterparts from Wales and Ireland. All of them thought that what they'd been told could be world-changing, but wanted to wait for the proof that the change in oxygen levels would provide. They'd all been getting advice on who were the most discreet agencies to task with monitoring oxygen levels and agreed to initiate a further conference call as soon as any drop was detected. Fiona had then gone for lunch with one of the civil service director generals, Lucy. How do you pronounce it? Is it pronounced Lucy? I don't know. Hang on. It's a Scottish name, so let's just see. L. Is that right? Oh, with an H on the end.
Lucy.
Oh, Lucy. All right. Yeah, I thought it was Lucy, but okay. Fiona had gone for lunch with one of the Civil Service Director Generals, Lucy Carmichael, had been there at the meeting with Mackenzie and Ronnie. Lucy was from Inverness and had seen a news story that she thought the Cabinet Secretary ought to see. She had the Inverness Courier website already loaded up on her iPad. It contained a video, which Lucy made Fiona watch. "So, what do you think?" Lucy asked. "There's no doubt," said Fiona. "That was the same young man who presented us with the directives on Thursday. This says he contacted his brother on Thursday evening and was taken home later that night." Lucy shook her head. "The timings work out. So why would Arbor Associates have a young man working for them who did not want to be there?" asked Fiona. "Did you notice signs of him being under any kind of duress when he was with us?" "No," said Lucy. "I thought he gave a very passionate presentation." Fiona shook her head. "Thanks, Lucy. I will look into it." When she got back to office that afternoon, she sent Derek Cockrell-Wright a text message asking him to read the Scottish Courier news item and then to call her. Before she went home that evening, her mobile phone rang. "That's odd," agreed Cockrell-Wright. "He gave an excellent presentation, but it does seem rather peculiar that he went home to his family that same night." "What about the girl with him?" asked Fiona. "What do you know about her?" "Veronica Arden. Next to nothing. Let me do some digging," he replied. It was almost time to go home that day, so Cockrell-Wright did not pass the task on to Sir Oliver Vaughan until Tuesday morning. On Thursday, a very excited Vaughan demanded a meeting with him. Cockrell-Wright was busy. He attended a briefing that morning, followed by a fundraising function that the Prime Minister had deemed that it would be appropriate for him to be seen at. He had finally found time to catch up with Sir Oliver late that afternoon at the Defra offices. "Sir Oliver," said Cockrell-Wright, "what is so exciting that you had to tell me in person?" "Well," said Sir Oliver, fingering a brown folder impatiently, "you already know that Mackenzie MacDonald, who was part of the delegation from Arbor Associates last week, was missing man Mackenzie Stewart, who went back home to his family not long after delivering Idrisil's directives to your counterpart in the Scottish Government." "Yes," replied Cockrell-Wright. Sir Oliver opened the folder in front of him and produced a photograph of Ronnie. "And do you know who this is?" Cockrell-Wright peered at the picture. "Yes, it is Veronica Arden." I just want to put a contraction in there. It's Veronica Arden, also from Arbor Associates, who delivered the presentation in tandem with Mackenzie last week. "No," Sir Oliver seems to take some kind of grim pleasure from delivering the news. "This is Veronica Keane, who went missing from Mansfield University on the 1st of January this year." "Oh," Cockrell-Wright did not seem taken aback. "And when did she turn up?" Sir Oliver shook his head. "She never did. There was a high-profile missing persons inquiry. Some of her clothes were found in Sherwood Forest, about 8 miles from her university digs, a couple of weeks later. The assumption from the local police was she had died, probably murdered. Her parents believe the same thing." Cockrell-Wright looked shocked and peered at the photograph again. "But this is definitely her?" Sir Oliver raised his eyebrows. "Yes, Minister." Cockrell-Wright closed his eyes and thought for a few seconds before opening them again. "So why did Arbor Associates use two people that were, at that time, believed to be missing?" "I don't know. Perhaps you should have another conference call with your Welsh and Irish colleagues. Whilst extremely unlikely, this could be a coincidence. If we can establish that their ambassadors are also people that are registered as missing, then we have a very disturbing pattern," agreed Cockrell-Wright. "Ask Teresa to set it up tomorrow morning, please. What about Miss Keane? Should we let her parents know that she is alive?" Cockrell-Wright pondered. "Do we know where she is?" Sir Oliver smiled. "Arbor Associates have a property in the Lake District where they trained Miss Keane and Mr. Stewart. We believe that she is still there. Okay, get me the Chief Constable of Cumbria Police on the phone. Sir Oliver left the room hurriedly. Cocklewright stared down at the photograph on his desk, tapping it impatiently with his forefinger. Right, that's okay. That was quite an easy chapter, that one. So I'm just going to run it through the old Grammarly. Let me just open that up. Go back to that. So we need to go File, Export to Word. And then I need to drag this into Grammarly. Okay, these are some quite... Okay, I'll go with that. That was easy. Mind you, bearing in mind I made very few alterations, and this chapter has been through Grammarly before. So let's download it. Let's drag it up there. Let's open it. Oh, bear with me. Right, there it is. Okay, let's just... Okay, so that's there. That I can close. That I can minimize. That I can get back up. God, I should have done this days ago. Right, so that is a chapter signed off. So let's just close it, because I've got this habit of not closing it and then sometimes pasting wrong bits into the wrong place. Right, so let me just go to there. Right, so let's go straight on with chapter 18, which is also not too long. Be lovely if I could get this done today. Chapter 18, Unravellings. It was a cold May morning in Inverness when the car containing Fiona McRae and Lucy Carmichael pulled up outside the Burnett Road police station. Before she got out of the car, McRae made sure that her coat was buttoned up and her scarf was wrapped firmly around her neck. It was often cooler up here in the Highlands than in the larger cities further south. It had been a quick and easy trip so far. Loganair did not do a direct flight from either Edinburgh or Glasgow up to Inverness, so the most direct route any airline offered was either via Heathrow or London City, or involved an overnight stop in Stornoway. It had not been hard to convince the First Minister that a private jet was justified on this occasion. The flight time had been barely half an hour, and the car had been allowed straight onto the tarmac to pick them up. The pair rushed through the driving rain into the station door, where a uniformed inspector was waiting. "Good morning." I'm not going to do the accent. "Good morning," said McRae once they were inside. "Welcome to Inverness, ma'am," said Inspector Williams. His accent was not Scottish. McRae was not an expert on English accents, but a guess would be that he was from the Teesside area. "The gentleman hasn't arrived yet. The car bringing him in had to pick up some burglars who got caught in the act by a homeowner. Badly hurt, one of them." McRae nodded. "Is there any chance of a coffee?" she asked. Williams stroked his chin. "There's a kitchen out the back near the interview suites. I'll make you one myself. Miss McRae, Miss Carmichael, if you'd like to follow me." Inspector Williams led them through what seemed like a maze of corridors, past various briefing areas, offices, and finally a block of interview rooms. At the end there was a small kitchenette with a kettle, fridge, microwave, and a few mugs and plates, as well as a sink full of dirty dishes. Taped to the cupboard underneath was a laminated sign saying anyone who does not wash up after themselves will be arrested. The final word was in bold, italics, and underline, and someone had written the words "Try it, you twat" in a mark pen underneath. Embarrassed, Williams tore the sign down and threw it into the overflowing bin. "What are your impressions of the young man?" asked McRae, as the inspector filled the cheap kettle with water. "Well," said the inspector, indicating a row of chairs. The three sat down. "He won't talk about what happened whilst he was away, but he does insist that his involvement with Arbour Associates was completely voluntary, as was his decision to leave. However, there is a gap in his story. We don't understand what happened. He refuses to be examined for signs of physical abuse and insists that he doesn't remember what happened during the months that he was away. He says his first recollection was being found in the woods by an old man who looked after him, and when he was a bit stronger he became involved with Arbour. He won't tell us who the old man was or where he lives. Says he doesn't really know." The kettle did not take long to boil, and presently the three of them were drinking instant black coffee, black since the milk in the fridge had curdled. The coffee from the vending machine near reception would probably have been better, McRae thought to herself. "Why are you so interested in this young man?" asked Williams. "Last week I was given a presentation by Arbour Associates, and he was one of the people giving that presentation. If the information we received was true, the consequences will be far-reaching," said McRae. "I cannot give you any detail as it's on the borderline of being classed as an official secret, but I can assure you that everyone will feel the impact, even up here." She shook her head. "The First Minister wants me to understand why someone who is part of all of that would suddenly give it up and go home to his family, given that he was not all close to them in the first place. His brother Aidan Stewart is known to us," said the inspector. "I know," said McRae. "I have read Mackenzie's file. He's had a difficult life. I've also read up on what he was living. I've also read up on where he was living when he was with Arbour Associates. Luxury by the standards of anyone, even me. So what made him give it up? The First Minister and I, in conjunction with Whitehall, have some difficult decisions to make. We need to understand." "How much of this will be on the record?" asked the inspector. "I am initially happy for you to record the interview," said McRae. "However, I may ask you to stop, depending on what comes up, and I don't want anything of what is said circulated beyond the people who hear it today." I don't want anything of what is said circulated beyond the people who hear it today. "So you, me, Miss Carmichael, and the other person in the room." "That'll be Constable Evelyn Maitland. She's only been here a couple of years, but has proven herself trustworthy in delicate situations. We use her in interviews where sensitivity is key. She's very good at being discreet, but getting witnesses and villains alike to trust her." Inspector Williams' mobile rang and he excused himself and picked up the call. "Mackenzie has arrived," he said. "We might as well head to the interview suite." The room in question was just across the hall. It was small, with a desk in the middle and two chairs on each side. Two further chairs had been dragged in and placed against the wall, so there was little room to walk. Audio and video recording equipment with controls were on the wall, and several cameras hung from the ceiling. Williams led Fiona McRae and Miss Carmichael in. There was already a young female police constable sitting on a chair on the further side of the table from the entrance. Williams smiled and greeted her. "Miss McRae, Miss Carmichael, this is PC Maitland." The girl had a dark brown hair in a bob and a pretty smile. I'm going to just reword that very slightly. The girl was wearing her dark brown hair in a bob and had a pretty smile. "How do you do?" responded Maitland politely and held out a hand. McRae shook it, then took a step back. "You understand the nature of what we'll be discussing. There may be things said here that you will seem unbelievable, ridiculous even. Your inspectors assured me that we can rely on your complete discretion." "Absolutely," replied Maitland. There was a knock on the door, which Williams opened. Two uniformed police officers were standing outside. And between... I'm just going to lose the standing. And between them, looking tired and miserable, was Mackenzie Stewart. He was wearing a grey tracksuit that was too big for him and had not shaved for a couple of days, though the growth on his face was not quick enough to be called a beard. He raised his eyes, then caught his breath when he saw Fiona McRae. Inspector Williams hit the record button on the wall. "Oh," was all Mackenzie said. He walked into the room and crossed to the far side of the table next to Maitland and sat down. He kept his eyes low, staring at the table. "I didn't know you were going to be here," he said quietly, gesturing to McRae without actually looking up. "You said you didn't want anyone with you," stated Williams. "Is that still the case?" "Aye," replied Mackenzie. Williams introduced everyone in the room. Mackenzie looked up for a moment as he was doing this. He recognised Miss Carmichael from Holyrood last week, and as he glanced at Evelyn Maitland, he realised that she had a faint glow about her. That was reassuring, although his first thought when seeing a Yakunda glow was of Marianne. He shook his head and tried to think about someone else. "This is not a formal interview," said Williams. "It has been convened at the request of Fiona McRae. Here, she needs to understand a few things." McRae smiled. "Mackenzie, when I saw you just over a week ago, you delivered an incredible ultimatum. You have obviously had some experiences that made you believe the things that you were saying. But you left Arbor Associates the same night, I believe. I want to know what changed. Was it premeditated?" "I had already contacted my family, aye," replied Mackenzie. "It seemed the best time to leave." "But you believe in the message you delivered?" Mackenzie nodded. "Of course." McRae smiled. "You can trust Inspector Williams and Constable Maitland. Say what you need to say." She paused. "Please, if I am to champion these directives, I need to understand what happened. Why did you leave?" "Well, that's easy," said Mackenzie. "I don't think the world will do enough. Everything is too big. We will fail to meet Idrisil's directives, and she will have to act as she said she would. So in 2 years, as the threatened consequences will play out. I didn't want to stay at Forest Lodge and wait for that to happen. I want to choose the people I die with." McRae's face remained unresponsive, but Williams and Maitland were starting to look extremely nervous. McRae glanced across to both of them. "Remember I said this was borderline officially secret? We've just stepped over that threshold. Please stop recording." Williams had turned a peculiar shade of grey, and Maitland looked disbelieving. "Can you stop the recording?" she asked again. Williams raised his hand slightly shakily and hit a button on the console. "I'm sorry," said Mackenzie aghast. "Arbor didn't brief you to keep the details to yourself?" Mackenzie screwed up his eyes. "I don't suppose they anticipated that I would leave them." "What's going on?" asked Williams. "I can't tell you," said McRae. "Perhaps nothing. We are not as pessimistic as Mackenzie here. I think I need to talk to him alone." "No," snapped Mackenzie, shaking his head. This isn't being recorded. I want someone here." "Such as who?" Mackenzie shrugged. "I can stay," piped up Maitland. Mackenzie looked coldly over at her, but his expression softened as he once again took in the soft, warm glow that permeated his perception of her. He looked back at McRae. "I think I trust her," he said. He looked back at Maitland. Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude." Williams gave Maitland a look that said, "You can tell me all about it later," as he stood up and knocked on the door. It opened and he stepped through, closing it softly behind him. "We need to make some huge decisions," said McRae softly, looking straight at Mackenzie. "I need to trust the integrity of the messenger. I need to know that it was your choice to be there with those people in the first place." "Aye, it was." McRae shook her head. "I'm going to need a little more than that. I'm going to need to understand why you were there and then why you left." Mackenzie sat for a few moments, composing his thoughts. He turned to Maitland. "This is all going to seem crazy to you. Sorry about that." He looked back at McRae and Carmichael. "The truth is I got involved because I was literally made to get involved." Now I need to italicise the made. "Okay. Have you told me? I don't recall if you've mentioned it before, but do tell." "As enforced?" "No. You're aware that I was a foundling. Nobody knows who my parents were. I was discovered in the woods by an old man. You met him, Mr. Carruthers." McRae noticeably blanched. "The gentleman who introduced me to Idrisil?" It was not a question. "Yes. He found me." "Let me guess, on the shores of Loch Lomond?" "Aye." "Oh, okay." "31% feels that monogamy is outdated. I wonder if they broke that down into male and female respondents, how different that would be. How many of that 31% were actually chaps?" I technically do have parents, but they probably have not lived for centuries. Idrisil chose 2 pieces of parental DNA that created a child to be able to do the things she needed them to do. I talked to Veronica, and she told me she had a DNA test a couple of years ago, and the scientist said her DNA was a mixture of two parents that could not exist today. Supposed to pay rent. Veronica is the same as you? Aye. The trees designed us and then incubated us. If you check the records, you will see that the old man found me and handed me over to the authorities. What should have happened at that point was that he would watch over me, make sure that I was looked after and nurtured to become the person they needed me to be. McCrae shook her head, but it didn't happen. No, Mr. Carruthers is a very old man, over 300 years. He is also a child of the tree. He is an older version of me. Now and then he was meant to interface with Idrisil. Living such a long life can be quite depressing, especially as you outlive everyone. When I was born, Carruthers had just lost his wife. Interfacing can help numb the pain, but he refused to do it. He did not want to lose the anguish of his loss because he was worried that it would change the way he felt about her. As a result, he stopped doing the other things he was meant to, such as protect me. Maitland was watching the exchange, trying to keep her face neutral. McCrae nodded. Your mother died. Your father met another woman who's a drug user. You were taken into care after some unspeakable experiences. Mackenzie looked down. When he looked up again, his eyes were red. Aye, if Carruthers had done his job, none of those things would have happened. Those early years made me into a different person. I was shaped into something that was less useful to the trees. I had more empathy than I should have. When I was finally activated and called in to be briefed on everything, the people at Arbor Associates realised that I would struggle to perform the function that I'd been created for. His eyes were bright red and a few tears were running down his cheek. Maitland handed him a tissue. The briefing from Idrisil felt like a relatively short conversation that happened after I was absorbed by the tree, but it took months. The trees communicated at a much lower rate than us. McCrae nodded. She knew this from personal experience. The one sentence the tree had spoken to her had taken hours. I tried to fulfill my role. I delivered the directives when I had to, but I couldn't do any more. Can you imagine me holding it together enough to tell you failed to meet the objectives, and as a result the human race is sentenced to death? I couldn't do that. So you left. There was a pause. Aye. Was that the only reason? McCrane leaned forward. Mackenzie, governments are being asked to make a series of decisions that are going to change the world forever. I need to trust their messenger and the integrity of those who created the message. What was the other reason you left? Mackenzie shook his head. That was a personal reason. I would still like you to tell me. It's not easy to talk about. McCrae softened her expression. It won't leave this room. I need you to help me understand. Mackenzie sniffed, and another tear ran down his cheek. Because of the things that happened to me, the idea of being intimate with anyone scares me. And something happened. Mackenzie nodded. Someone tried to make you do something you didn't want to. Mackenzie's head shot up. Oh, that reminds me. I've got to go and take something out of chapter 16. Mackenzie's head shot up. No, not that. I started to get close with one of the staff at the lodge. Someone who I genuinely trusted and felt comfortable with. But they're very complex and not female. The feelings I had for them confused me. They still do. They're non-binary, born male, look and dress and behave more female, but identify as neither. I really like them. They were my closest friend in that place, and we were getting closer. It scared me. I don't know how else to explain it. It's probably a better way of saying that sentence. You're not gay then? It was the first thing Maitland had said in a while. No. So you were worried about what other people would think or say if you and she got closer? Maitland asked. They, not she. And I think so. Yes. Who? Sorry? Who were you worried about having an opinion on you and your friend? What? Oh, okay. Mackenzie shook his head and broke down fully into tears. I don't know, he cried. I don't know. Maitland looked up and saw an expression on McCrae's face that she did not expect from a politician. She was nodding slowly and she reached across and took Mackenzie's hand. Mackenzie, I'm sorry. I had to understand why you would want to get out of there. And now I do. I'm sorry to put you through that. Look at me. Mackenzie raised his red eyes. McCrae smiled. I have some advice for you. I've no idea. Haribo Recall. I know what Haribo are, obviously, But got to do Harry Potter sweets now. I'm confused now. Haribo. Oh, cannabis found in the Netherlands. Oh, okay. It's the Netherlands. It was probably a member. If they're manufactured there as well, I think I know what happened. Mackenzie raised his eyes. McCrae, I have some advice for you. Don't be afraid to like someone. Don't lose a friend because you're worried about other people think. Because you are worried about what other people will think. I was married 15 years. It took me forever to tell my husband that it just wasn't working. He had no idea and it was not his fault. I almost never had the courage to tell the person I liked how I felt. It was a huge gamble. We have to be careful, but we are happy now. McCrae looked back at Miss Carmichael, who gave a slightly shy smile back. If the shit is about to hit the fan, Mackenzie, then don't waste time worrying about what other people think. She withdrew her hand and sat back. I understand why you left. I appreciate it's nothing sinister. I'm sorry to have caused you distress, Mackenzie. If I need to ask you anything else, do you mind if I call you? Mackenzie shook his head. Thank you, said McCrae, who stood up, along with Miss Carmichael. She knocked on the door, which opened, and the three left the room. A few seconds later, Inspector Williams stepped in. He looked meaningfully at Maitland, who shook her head. That was very difficult for him. I think I ought to take him home. Williams rolled his eyes. Very well, then, he said reluctantly, then straight back to my office. Mackenzie sat in the passenger seat of the police car as Constable Maitland drove him to his bedsit. It was just out of town to the southwest, close to the road that led to the west bank of Loch Ness. Maitland was not sure what to say to Mackenzie, who was still quiet from the conversation with McCrae. The car pulled up outside his flat, and Maitland applied the handbrake. Look, she said, I won't pretend to understand what just happened, but if you ever need to talk to anyone, you can talk to me. She pulled out a card with the details on it and then wrote a phone number on the back. That's my personal number. You can call me at any time. Mackenzie uttered his first words since they'd entered the car. Thanks. He opened the door and stepped out. The house he was living in had been converted into 3 bedsits with a shared kitchen and bathroom. When he'd been on the streets, it had seemed amazing, but after Forest Lodge it was tiny, and his housemates were not people he would have chosen to live with. I mean it, called Maitland from her open car window. Mackenzie looked back and nodded, then stopped at the front door. It was open, and there were signs of damage to the lock. There's something wrong, he said, turning back to the police officer. We've been broken into. The door was suddenly pulled open from the inside and 2 men burst out. Both were in dark clothing, had similar large builds and were wearing back balaclavas. One of them grabbed Mackenzie by the throat. He not even had time to react before he was punched in the face and fell to the floor. Maitland jumped out of the car and realised that the other man was pointing a gun at her. Throw your radio, then hands up, he shouted. Maitland did as she was told. Mackenzie was struggling to his feet, to find he also had a gun pointed at him. Into the car, said the man in front of him, indicating a black sedan parked on the opposite side of the street. Or what? Said Mackenzie softly. Or I'll kill your friend. Mackenzie shook his head. Just kill me, he said softly, glaring at the man with the gun. You'd be doing me a favour. There was a sudden, extremely loud sound of a gunshot. Mackenzie shut his eyes, but as the next few moments passed, he realised that the only pain he was feeling was in his ears. They had most likely shot Maitland. Slowly he opened his eyes. The person who had been pointing the gun at him had dropped to the floor and was screaming, his weapon on the pavement. He turned around to see that Maitland was holding the other gun as well as a taser, which was pointed at the first man. 2 cables ran from it into his left leg. Mackenzie, in a daze, picked up the gun from the ground and pointed it at the other man who had punched him. Put the gun down, Mackenzie, ordered Maitland. Confused, he walked over and handed it to her. And pass me the radio. Mackenzie hesitated. Now, she commanded. Mackenzie grabbed the radio from the ground and handed it to her. As Maitland called Burnett Road, residents were coming out from nearby houses. One thick-set, bald man wearing just a white sleeveless vest and grey shorts tried to restrain one of the men, despite Maitland's shouted instructions. In the confusion, one of them pulled out a second gun. Undeterred, the resident kicked the attacker savagely in the leg before finding the weapon pointed at him. He raised his hands and stepped back as the 2 men retreated to the waiting car, which accelerated away very quickly. Several onlookers had to jump out of the way as the car steered directly towards them to get to the end of the close. Please, can everyone return to the home, shouted Maitland. I've back up on the way. People kept milling about, completely ignoring her instructions. The situation is now under control. I'm not safe, Mackenzie said to himself. He opened his rucksack, pulled out his mobile phone and placed it on the ground, then walked calmly away from the crowd. Come back! Maitland screamed after him. Mackenzie broke into a run and jumped over a low fence at the far end of the road. Torn between preserving the scene and chasing Mackenzie, Maitland swore and shook her head. Someone else would have to pick him up. I'm going to say she reached for her radio. Just add that. She raised the radio to her mouth. Right. Yeah. Mackenzie meanwhile dashed across the road, paying little heed, I think would be a better way of saying that, to the traffic and into the car park of a nearby golf course. Looking behind him, there did not seem to be anyone pursuing him, but he could see the main road and a couple of police vans racing along with sirens sounding and blue lights flashing. He saw a taxi had just dropped someone off at the front doors of the club entrance. He walked calmly to it and knocked on the door. Any chance you're free? Where do you want to go to, son? Good question. He had no idea. Train station. The driver nodded. Mackenzie stepped in and the car pulled out into the road as more police cars shot past. They seem busy today, exclaimed the driver. I wonder what's going on. Yeah, said Mackenzie, pulling on his seatbelt. I wonder. Fiona McRae sat in the back seat of the car as it took her and Miss Carmichael to the airport. She was dying for a cigarette and a mobile phone was up against her ear. She was slowly shaking her head. And when will he be available? She asked. The minister is in meetings and briefings all day. This is about as urgent as it can be, declared McRae. It almost certainly relates to the meeting he is having. I'll pass on a message, said the voice. What about Sir Oliver Vaughan? With the minister. The phone buzzed. McRae glanced at the screen and saw that it was Inspector Williams. I have another urgent call, she called, but I will call you back. She switched between the calls. Inspector Williams, it's Fiona McRae. What can I do for you? She sincerely hoped he was not about to ask for more information about what he'd just overheard. It's Mackenzie. There's just been an attempt on his life. Just going to add a detail here, which does come up later. Blood loss. Mackenzie. There's been an attempt on his life. Lucky he's not hurt, but he's bolted. With no idea where he is. His three housemates have all been shot dead. Oh no, I've already said that in the next bloody sentence. See, read ahead, idiot. Was anyone else involved? Constable Maitland was there. She's okay, but shots were fired. 2 men with guns have broken his home. Mackenzie's housemates are dead. McRae looked shocked. What? Who are these people? We have no idea. The Red Dragon Lady interested in her. Yeah. It's always fun, isn't it? She shook her head. Keep me informed. As far as we know, Mackenzie's nothing in his background that might make him a target for anything, apart from his link to Arbor, but I can't believe this has anything to do with them. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Derek Cockrell-Wright. I have another call I must take. Keep me in the loop. She switched calls again. Fiona, said the smarmy voice over the phone. What can I do for you? I've spoken to Mackenzie Stewart, and I'm satisfied that his reasons for leaving Arbor were personal and no cause for concern. However, there's just been an attempt on his life. I've found out some things too, said Cockrell-Wright. Did you know that both of our ambassadors are missing persons, not just your young man? Not for sure, but after my conversation with Mackenzie, I assumed it might be the case. Incidentally, do you happen to know if Miss Arden was adopted? I believe she was. So was Mackenzie. Cockrell-Wright paused. That is slightly worrying. Like I said, Mackenzie assures me that he was not coerced into anything, which is why he was allowed to leave Arbor. Cockrell-Wright smiled. But he's on the other end of the phone, so he wouldn't see that, so I'm going to lose that. He's Basic politics between dragons and humans was clearing up problems in both factions. Oh, he's a retired archage. You mean March Mage by any chance? I'm guessing. Yeah. Runs a restaurant. I love it. It's a bit odd though, isn't it? Why would they use people that were adopted, then missing and presumed dead, to deliver the directives? Can you do a background check on Miss Arden? Already on it, said Cocklewright. I will let you know as soon as I find anything. The line went dead. McCrae shook her head and wished again that she could have a cigarette. Yeah. Bard not getting this dragon. Yeah, I've never really written anything. Well, I did try to once write, proper sort of dragons and elves and goblins. I did once try to write that kind of fantasy. It wasn't bad. I never finished it. I often wonder if as a project it might be worth picking up down the line, but I'm having far too much fun writing in this kind of, I don't know, pseudo real world. Right, let's just get that going again. He won't tell us who the old man is. Okay, that's a fair comment. So he doesn't know. Let's lose the really. I'll accept that. Received is true. That's better. Let's correct it that way. Oh, I've got a package being delivered today, have I? Interesting. I wonder what that is. Let me have a quick look. I'm going to remove the word, obviously. Now I'll lose that. The trees communicate. The trees communicate. There we go. Lose the. Didn't dare to. Yeah, okay. Okay. Right, so let's download that corrected version of the file. Let's drag it there. And let's, oh no, hang on, open it. Copy it. Okay, so that's that chapter signed off. That's good. Now, I've remembered something I need to alter in the previous chapter, which is just a bit naff. So let's close those, delete those, and then just go into, now this is my Right, that whole bit is going. There we go. So that's exactly. Oh, that was just deleting an extra bit. Chris Tossman, why I used fake court predictions via AI garbage. Oh, interesting. Where was that? Oh, okay. I'm pretty sure there's no more references to that moment, but let me just possibly towards the end of the chapter. Right, so that needs to go because that didn't happen. Let's lose that. Red Dragon Lady being through a small portal. Or courtship failed. Okay, again, context. I'll let you know as I eventually. Mary shook their head and nodded. I do. Do you? Yes. Nothing makes you gay. Because you are attracted to me. I come to you. Sorry, loads of bits. Right, that's all I needed to do. That's all I needed to do to make that alteration. Right, so I need to drag chapter 18 down to the edited chapters bit. There we go, and let's go straight into chapter 19. I might get up to chapter 20 done. When have I got to go out? Oh God, not for another 4 hours, so I should get... Will I get this done today? Wouldn't that be good if I did? Right, this is a longer chapter. The last 2 chapters are quite long, actually, or the next 2. So, well, if I can get this one done, that's still me nearly there. Okay, so chapter 19, Porous. Annie Keene drove her car into the double garage, climbed out of it and closed the door behind her. She stepped outside and pulled the shutter down. It fell into place with a mild clang. She walked across to the back door. The house was quite large and people occasionally assumed it was 2 properties. Ronnie had always squealed with delight when the same cold caller knocked on the utility room door, only to recognise with horror it had been opened by the same person who had turned them away moments before. Thoughts of Ronnie brought tears to Annie's eyes, and she scuttled through the door, slamming it quick behind her quickly. She dashed through the utility room and into the kitchen, dumped a shopping bag on the table, and used some kitchen towel to dry her eyes before pouring herself a glass of water. The last 4.5 months had been the most painful in her life. It had put a dangerous strain on her relationship with George because he had accepted that Ronnie was gone. He argued that if she was alive, she would have made an effort to contact them. He had not moved on exactly, but he had accepted that he was never going to see his daughter again. This upset Annie and had caused quite a few brutal arguments in the early months. She accused him of giving up too early and too easily, and even moved out to live with her parents for a couple of weeks after one row. Argument. Let's find a better word for argument. Let's find a better word for argument than row. Exchanges, there we go, that's a better way of saying it. In the early months, she accused him of going and he moved out to live with her parents for a couple of weeks after one row. But they quickly persuaded her to go back. Things have been more peaceful since then. Annie even started to understand why George thought what he thought, even she could not bring herself to agree. She climbed the wooden stairs to their bedroom, passing a couple of family pictures on the walls of the staircase. Initially, it had been too much to see image of their missing daughter hanging there, and she'd taken them down. George had put them back up when she'd been staying with her parents. As she walked past one of the family pictures, she kissed the tips of her fingers, forefinger and middle finger, and touched the picture of Ron as she walked past. "I'll see you again one day, Poppet," she said quietly. Annie changed from a work suit and into jeans and a t-shirt. She and George had fallen into the habit of eating a lot of takeaway food recently. In early days, she decided that she was going to make them dinner tonight for the first time in a while. As she fried some onions and mince in the skillet, she took knives and forks from the drawer and walked through to the dining room to set the table. She realised that she had, without thinking, picked up 3 sets of everything. She shook her head, then returned to the kitchen with 1 set, which she dumped unceremoniously back into the utensil tray. George pulled into the driveway a few minutes after she had completed cooking. She watched him put the car away and come in through the side door. His hair was a lot greyer than it had been this time last year. What had just been a hint on the temples was now more widespread. His features looked more careworn than they had. He walked into the kitchen and smiled at the smell of food. "How was your day?" asked Annie. "Do you have an answer yet?" George smiled gently, and the expression took years from his face. "Yes, I do. Finally, I do. They're going to allow it. This will be my final term at Oakwood. I'm swapping with Oliver at Pittville." Annie wrapped her arms around him and gave him a tight hug. George blinked away his silent tears as his wife gave him a gentle kiss on the lips. "I think you've done brilliantly to stay put," she said. The people who had known Ronnie, especially her teachers, had been devastated when she vanished, and whilst all of her peers had left the school at the end of the previous academic year, plenty of their siblings were still studying there. There'd been a huge sense of loss across the whole school, and for a while it had been too much for George. He'd taken some time off and only agreed to go back once the Education Authority said they would consider moving him elsewhere. George went upstairs to change, touching the family picture on the way. It was his ritual too, although neither of them did it in front of each other. He came back down and walked through the hall into the dining room. Annie had set the food out ready for them, a delicious bolognese with garlic bread. She sat down and George was about to join her when they heard a knock on the door. "I'll go," he said, and walked back into the hall. He looked through the door and saw that 2 police officers were standing outside. He took a deep breath. "Annie," he called, "it's the police." After feeling almost calm for the first time since January, his heart rate rapidly increased. He could feel a rush in his ears and felt slightly faint. Knowing that he was about to find out something significant, he opened the door with trembling hands. Annie was beside him. The male police officer stepped forward, ahead of his companion, who was a female constable. "George and Annie Keane," George nodded. "Can we come in? We'd like to talk to you about your daughter." George nodded and gestured for them to come in. As Annie led them to the living room, George closed the front door and followed them. "I think you should both sit down," said the inspector. "It's not the worst news, but I still think it would be for the best." George and I sat immediately down on the double sofa, and the inspector took the chair diagonally opposite them. George put his arm around his wife and squeezed her shoulders. "The good news is that we found her. She is alive and well." Annie burst into tears and rested her head on George's chest. Tears formed in her eyes, and he lowered his mouth to her ear. "You are right, love. You are right." Annie came to her senses a moment later. "What's happened? When can we see her?" "We're not sure what happened. She was recently seen in London. She's working for a group called Arbour Associates and is living at one of their facilities in the Lake District. She has changed her name. We don't know any more than that." Annie and George stared at each other, then back at the inspector. "I don't understand, said Annie. "She would never have let us think she had died. What happened?" "The information came from a ministerial source. As far as I know, she's not aware that you've been informed that she is safe and well." There was a long pause. "I don't understand either," said George eventually, looking at Annie, who was frowning. "It makes no sense." "Can we see her?" asked Annie again. "I have not been told that you cannot," said the inspector. "Where precisely is she?" The inspector pulled a notebook from his pocket. "Cumberland Police will be talking to her later today." He turned a page. "Do you have a pen and paper?" Annie leapt up and grabbed a notepad and pen. The inspector read the address and postcode out to her, and she wrote it down. The police stayed for a few more minutes and then left. George and Annie were sitting on the sofa, feeling a mixture of joy, surprise and anger. George was shaking his head. "We should tell people," he said. Annie nodded. "You start with family," she said. "There's one person I think we should tell first." George raised his eyebrows. "Danny?" Annie nodded. She had been terribly cruel to him the first week after Ronnie had gone missing. She had subsequently realised that he was as devastated about her disappearance as they were, and had felt guilty that she had even suspected that he might know more. George went into the study and started making phone calls. He called his parents, then Annie's parents, and was about to call his sister when Annie came into the room, still holding a mobile phone. She had a perturbed expression on her face. "Is he okay?" asked George. "I'm not sure," said Annie. "Who have you called?" "Mum and Dad, your mum and Dad, and Marion." I'll do some," said Anne, taking the phone from his hands. She still wore a flustered expression. "What's up, love?" asked George. "Something wasn't right," said Annie, realising. "Something wasn't right," said Annie, realisation slowly crossing her face. His reactions were off. "I think he already knew, George. I think he already knew." I'm going to italicise the "new," the second "new," which of course we know that he did. Right, the television in the garden room was on, and Oakley was watching the BBC News channel, a large frown on his face, and an empty plate and mug on the table before him. He had not been in the right frame of mind to eat with the others. Ronnie and Marianne in particular held him responsible for what had happened to Mackenzie, and had been constantly needling him about it. There was another worrying development. It had not been the main headline, but a couple of channels were reporting that some trees, which had only just started to grow leaves after the winter, were already shedding them. He had noticed it himself as he had walked around the grounds that morning. The place had an autumnal feel, which was ridiculous towards the end of spring. He flipped to another news channel to see a similar report on an American network. He knew the trees would stop producing oxygen, but he had not known that they would shed their leaves. It could only be a matter of days before the levels of oxygen in the atmosphere had reduced by enough to be detected. He sat on the sofa feeling helpless, then stood and walked through the kitchen to the snug. Ronnie had not come down for lunch, which was unusual. Ursula was sitting at the table with a slice of cake and a cup of tea. He sighed and walked over to the dishwasher and put his dirty plates and cutlery into it. His phone rang. He fished it out of his pocket and saw the name Carruthers on the screen. What did the old fool want now? He shook his head, walked into the hall and answered the call. "Mr. Oakley, it's Carruthers." "Yes, thank you. I still have caller display," said Oakley irritably. "There's no need to be patronising," was the retort from the other end of the line. "Have you been updated about Mackenzie?" "I know he's run off. What more is there to know?" "Someone tried to murder him yesterday." Oakley's eyes widened. "I beg your pardon?" He heard Carruthers cough. The police did a follow-up interview with him yesterday morning. Fiona McRae attended, though they were not letting people know that part. Although they're not letting people know that part. The police ran him home afterwards, and there was an armed intruder in the house. Oakley shook his head. Is he all right? Marianne walked past and heard him. They stopped. Is who all right? They whispered. Oakley held up his hand to silence them. We know he was not injured in the attack. He was protected by an incredibly brave young police constable. She hurt those two attackers, but both got away, and so did Mackenzie. Where is he now? Marianne glared at him. I'm working on it, said Carruthers. I have identified a taxi driver that took him to Inverness railway station. The police don't know about that yet, so they won't be finding out from me. Why the hell not? Think about it. Who would target Mackenzie? Apart from Fiona McRae, Derek Cocklewright and a handful of civil servants, who even knows of his significance? You're saying it's an inside job? Oakley shook his head as he said this, all the while watching Marianne start to look more and more perturbed. It's got to be, hasn't it? He heard him cough again. Well, hasn't it? What are you insinuating? Lord Farnborough, he told you to get rid of the lad. How could you possibly know that? Snapped Oakley. It doesn't matter how I know. I've let him down once, and I'm not going to allow that to happen again. You do know I told Farnborough to get stuffed? Aye. Oakley shook his head. You really think this has something to do with him? He could almost hear Carruthers shaking his head. I don't know. I hope not. He could hear a steely edge in the old man's voice that had not been there at the start of the month. Ursula had said that when he was focused he would never let anything go. The version he had seen, the sad and pathetic drunk incapable of taking responsibility for his reactions, appeared to be a thing of the past. I'll do some digging. I'll let you know what I come up with. Yes, please do. The line cut and Oakley returned his phone to his pocket. He looked around to talk to Marianne, only to find that Ronnie was standing next to them as well. He frowned. Well? Asked Marianne in exasperation. Someone tried to shoot Mackenzie this morning. He's okay, he said hurriedly as he watched Marianne's face start to wrinkle. Ronnie put a protective arm around them. Carruthers is onto it now. Forgive me if that doesn't fill me with confidence, said Marianne quietly. Ursula stood up. Well, it should, dear. Now he is interfaced, Mr. Carruthers is, as they say, firing on all cylinders. Remember, I've known him for a couple of centuries. What you have seen in the last few years is not a true reflection of the man. Marianne still looked concerned. You asked if it had anything to do with Lord Farnborough. Why? Oakley looked enormously uncomfortable. At the start, he thought Mackenzie was a liability. But Mackenzie won him round. He instructed me not to act when he absconded. Eventually, he thought to himself. Marianne was not convinced. And do you believe him? You don't think he knew you would resist and decide to give the dirty job to someone else? This was dangerous territory, and Oakley knew it. He had no idea if he trusted Farnborough or not. This could be his work. Absolutely not, he said, with much more certainty than he felt. Marianne shook her head and ran into the kitchen. Ronnie shrugged and went after them. Oakley sat down at the large empty table. He looked imploringly across to Ursula. He wouldn't, would he? It's my job to tidy up loose ends. If he sets somebody else on it... Ursula walked over to join him, shaking her head. I'm not sure. We need to be careful. Oakley wanted another stiff drink, but as that meant passing Marianne and Ronnie to get to the cellar, he resisted. Carruthers is so protective of Mackenzie now, he shook his head. Hopefully not too little too late. Ronnie, Mackenzie and the others like them are the future, said Ursula quietly. I won't accept anyone putting them in danger. Oakley looked her square in the face. Neither will I. Of that I have no doubt. Ursula smiled. She squeezed his hand. We are on the same side, Mr. Oakley, but any worries you have about Lord Farnborough's motives are to stay between you and me, not a further word to Marianne or Ronnie or Marianne. Oakley nodded. That would be the professional thing to do. He took a deep breath, then started walking towards the kitchen. Sod this, I need a drink. I'm going to get myself a whiskey. Do you want anything? A small dry sherry would be nice, dear. Oakley nodded. I'll get Marianne something as well. He walked over to the doors and made his way into the kitchen. Ursula gave him a sad smile. Suddenly everything seemed very complicated indeed. Derek Cocklewright sat at his desk in the office at the office in his ministry, and it was his ministry, as he was quick to point out to everyone whenever they were lucky enough to enter this space. Apart from a couple of filing cabinets in the corner of the room, and the art on the wall. That sentence doesn't make sense. That needs a slight alteration. space. There were a pair. There was a pair. There were a pair of. There were a pair of filing cabinets in the corner of the room, and the arsenal was not as pretentious as people who knew him would have assumed it would be. The largest painting, whilst in an expensive-looking and ornate frame, was not something borrowed from the National Gallery. It was a landscape painted by his youngest daughter in the style of Constable, only with some deliberate nods to the present. There was a combine harvester in the background and some telegraph poles. Cockerell Wright thought it was wonderful. Almost everybody else who saw it thought it was vulgar. There was a knock on the door. Cockerell Wright looked up over his half-moon spectacles and peered at the heavy door. "Come in." As he had expected, it was Sir Oliver Vaughan. Vaughan entered the room and closed the door carefully behind him. He held some beige document wallets in his hands and put the first one gently down on the desk. "Her name is not Veronica Arden. It is Veronica Alice Keane." Haven't I already established this? Just need to quickly look at the previous chapter, make sure I'm not repeating myself. Hang on. Maybe it's in the previous one. Hang on. Yeah. So this is an element of repetition that I hadn't noticed when reading it before. Let me have a look. So I'm going to have to Right, that might be better. There's a knock on the door. Cogler, "Come in, it's expected." It was Sir Oliver Vaughan. Vaughan entered the room and closed the door carefully behind him. He held some beige documents in his hands and put the first one gently down on the desk. "We already know that her name is not Veronica Arden. It's Veronica Alice Keane, and she went missing at the New Year. Presumed dead." He opened the folder and it contained police reports and a photograph. Cockerell pulled out the picture and examined it. Mackenzie Stewart is missing and presumed dead too. He threw the second document onto the table. Cockroach. Vaughan threw the second document onto the table. Cockroach opened it. At the front, attached on the police report was a photograph of Mackenzie. But there's more, and I think I'm the first person to uncover this. That's better. He pushed some of the piece of paper to one side and pulled out a photocopy of Mackenzie's birth certificate. He pointed to the columns where the details of the parents should have been given. Written in both columns was the word unknown. He's what's the name given to children who don't know who their parents were? Vaughan smiled. Foundling. And yes, it would appear that our Mr. Mackenzie Stewart is precisely that. He pushed the fold to one side to get the one for Veronica underneath. He flipped through the papers until he came to her birth certificate. Cockroach looked down at it and saw the details of her parents were unknown as well. He looked up. What? Idrisil's ambassadors are both foundlings who went missing earlier this year. Cockroach shook his head. It could be an extraordinary coincidence. Vaughan placed a third folder on the desk. Bevan Griffiths delivered Idrisil's message to the Welsh Assembly's Environment Minister. He opened the folder to show a photograph of a young-looking, dark-haired girl, then rummaged down to the birth certificate. Went missing just after Christmas, also a foundling. He placed the fourth and final folder on the table, but did not open it. I've been in touch with my counterpart in the Irish government. It's the same. All four ambassadors, foundlings that vanished at the tail end of last year or at the start of this year. Cockleroy shook his head. Not a coincidence then. No, Minister. Cockleroy removed his glasses again. Does the veracity of the messenger impact on the significance of the message? Vaughan shook his head. I don't know. Cockleroy pulled out Ronnie's file and started flipping through it again. I say, do her parents know that she's still alive? That was right at the end of the last bit, wasn't it? Hang on. So he's spoken directly to the Chief Constable, so actually he would know that. So it might be better to remove that, actually. Get out, I need to think. Ooh, the mail. Right, that's better. That sorts out that little continuity error. Right, I'm just going to go and see what mail has arrived. I have a feeling it's an audio drama on CD. Oh yeah. Is that going to struggle to go through the door, or? Oh, okay, no worries. Well, I'm here now, might as well. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Is that everything? Cheers. Ooh, the things I'm not sure what they all are. Well, I know what one of them is. Right. So the first thing is a Big Finish audio CD. It should be part of the Torchwood range. So that's the one that I'm expecting. Oh, I know what that one is. So, yes, it's Torchwood. It's the latest Torchwood CD. This is an interesting one because it's using their kind of, what I would call their expanded universe. So, that character was a character they created for the continuation of Torchwood. So, Torchwood ran for 4 series on the television. Big Finish have done series 5, 6 and 7. And that was a character created for those seasons. And what's interesting is Russell T Davies helped create some of the characters. This one was one of the characters that he rejected, that he said he didn't think would be part of Torchwood. And they used the character anyway, but had him as a periphery character rather than as a main Torchwood character. Right, I do know what this is. I just remembered. There's a company that does medals, so you can do these walking challenges and stuff. So, and I've kind of bought a load of them when I was much more enthusiastic about it. But as I've paid for them, I'm still doing the challenges. So this one is, which one is it? Oh, it's for the South Downs Way. And they're actually quite nice. They're actually quite pleasant things. Hang on. Let me just pull it out of it. So, hooray, I've walked 100 miles. Woohoo! Yeah, I'm not that impressed, really. They did some branded ones. I really need to actually get back into the... So it was 100 miles of walking I did, and it shows you some of the things on there. So it's Winchester to Eastbourne. Hang on, is my phone still doing the attached to... No. Let's just try something. This might give you precisely nothing, in which case, apologies. Let me just switch the screen to... Let's see if I can go to that. Yes, it's going to give you precisely nothing because the phone isn't connected. Never mind. It was just a thought. That's annoying because normally when my phone is connected to... when I'm doing this, my phone is connected and it gets annoying because I can't stop it being. Now the one time I want it to be. But yeah, so they're quite nice. Oh, you can see that actually. It's a virtual challenge. And ooh, and on the back it's got some of the highlights of the route and stuff. And so on. So it's not a cheap total piece of crap. It's actually quite nice, but I've kind of given up doing those now. But I've got one more that I've purchased, so yeah, I will. Okay. Anyway, ignore that. Let's go back to what I was doing. So I've made some slight alterations there. Oh no, I was about to, wasn't I? Oh no, that works now. Cockroach pulled up Ronnie's file and started flicking through again. I say, do her parents know that she's still alive? Vaughan shook his head. I got someone's telephone Gloucestershire police. The case is more or less shut as far as they're concerned. She's dead. Mr. Shook said, Fiona Chris says Mr. Stewart was not under any kind of duress, so we must assume the same is true for Miss Keane. If her parents think she's dead, there is a reason. So until we know more, we need to respect it. Can you arrange for someone to visit Miss Keane, just to confirm that she is who we suspect she is? I am ready to set the wheels in motion now, confirmed Vaughan. Do it, said Cocker Wright. Do not let the parents know. They already know. Even once we've confirmed her identity. He glanced down at the files in front of him and shook his head again. I want us to keep this to ourselves for now. I'll call me at Fiona Crow once we're sure. Also, can you arrange for someone to get me Lord Farnborough? He has a lot of explaining to do. I anticipated that and took the liberty of trying to contact him. He is, and I quote, unavailable for the foreseeable future, and we've been given the number of a Gordon Oakley to contact instead. Oakley? He was there with Farnborough and the Foundlings at the meeting, was he not? He was, Minister, so I'm going to lose the from there. He was, Minister. He will have to do then. One last thing. Where is Miss Keane now? In a property in the Lake District, owned by Arbor Associates. Cocker Wright frowned. Isn't Farnborough on the board of directors for Arbor Associates? Vaughan smiled. Yes. Cocker Wright nodded again. I don't know who they are, what they're about. Can you arrange to get me as much information on them as possible? I can, Minister. Good. Send the police to identify Miss Keane. Get me everything on Arbor Associates. That will do for now. Vaughan looked up. Certainly, Minister. He gave a curt nod and left the room, closing the door behind him. Cockerwright flicked through the 4 folders in front of him, skim reading the details. This was worrying. Until now, all he needed to be concerned with was the message, not the messenger. He sat there thinking for a few moments, drumming his fingers on the desk and trying to decide what he needed to do next. Finally, he made a decision and picked up the phone. Can you get me the Prime Minister's office, please? Ronnie stepped down from the treadmill in the basement. Marianne was next to her on the exercise bike. Both had white towels draped around their shoulders. There was loud dance music playing from a playlist via the sound system. As soon as Ronnie walked over to the drinking fountain next to the steps, Marianne dismounted the bike, waving at Ronnie as they did so. Ronnie gave him a thumbs up and Marianne climbed up the step onto the treadmill, unconsciously wiping the support bars and control panel with their towel before starting the belt. Ronnie drank a cup of glass of water and was about to climb up onto the stepper when the music cut off. They looked at each other. Oakley's voice came over the speaker system. Marianne, I need you in my office now. I have police at the main gate. Ronnie, go to your room. Marianne hit the button that slowed the machine and stepped off. They were wearing a pair of leggings and a midriff revealing top. They glanced at the tracksuit top that Ronnie had left hanging at the bottom of the steps and walked over to it. Can I borrow this, please? I asked. Ronnie nodded. I'll grab something from upstairs. The pair of them almost ran up into and through the kitchen. Marianne turned right into the office as Ronnie launched himself up the curved staircase. Oakley was sitting behind his desk. The computer was showing a live CCTV feed from the front gate. What's this about? Asked Marianne, slightly out of breath and pulling up the zip on the tracksuit top. I'm only guessing, but I reckon fallout from Mackenzie. Oakley tapped a pen he had in his right hand on the desk in annoyance. Marianne looked at the video image. A police van had pulled up next to the wall and a further police car was arriving and pulling just in front of it, just so that makes more sense. Pulling in just in front of it. The driver got out and walked to the intercom was set in the stone of the outside wall, then pressed the button. A bell sounded in the hall, loud enough for most people on the ground floor to hear, and Oakley's phone also pinged as a notification popped onto the screen. Opting to answer the intercom using the computer, Oakley pressed a button to answer. Yes, Forest Lodge, can I help you? There was a brief voice. Is this Forest Lodge property of Arbor Associates? Oakley bit his tongue and his immediate thought was to be sarcastic. He grimaced. It certainly is, officer. How may I help you? He put a forced smile on his face. We've been informed that you may have a missing person by the name of Veronica Keane on the premises. There was another pause as the officer waited for a response. Oakley shook his head. And what makes you think that? I have the Chief Constable of Cumbria Police with me. We do not have a warrant to enter the property, but I would very much like the opportunity to talk to you. Oakley rolled his eyes. Yes, of course, officer. I have a young lady by the name of Veronica Arden here. You may speak to her. When you get here, ask to speak to Mr. Oakley. He mouthed, Go and get her, to Marianne, then pressed the button to open the gates. After a few moments, he watched them swing slowly open on the monitor, and the car, followed by the van, drove in. Oakley waited until the second vehicle was clear, and then closed the gates. Marianne was on the phone. Mr. Oakley wants you to come down. Really bloody quickly, Oakley yelled. Now, in fact. Marianne scowled. You got that, they said into the phone. A few seconds later, Ronnie came pelting down the stairs and into the office, leaving the door open. What's happening? Someone has put two and two together and realised that you are the girl who went missing from Mansfield University at the start of the year. Ronnie nodded, thinking. They did a background check on me after they realised that Mackenzie was a missing person. Obviously, snapped Oakley. I don't see any reason to deny it. I need you to tell them you're here willingly. Of course, Ronnie nodded, as all three of them watched the CCTV feed of the police vehicles driving up the long driveway. Marianne, answer the door when they get here and let them in. Take them into the drawing room and sit them down. What are you going to do? Marianne asked. I'm going to try and get Cockerell right on the phone. He must have something to do with this. Tell them I'll be there in a few minutes. What do you want me to do? Asked Ronnie. Sit down and shut up, said Oakley, with a sharper tone than he had intended. He leapt out of his seat and ran through to the library opposite, slamming the door behind him. Ronnie sat down behind the desk. I'll go and let them in then, said Marianne as they left the office, shutting the door behind them. They looked to the right at the front door as their phone buzzed. They looked down at the call display and answered the call. Yes, Ronnie? They've just parked outside the front door. It looks like the officers in the van are staying put. You've got the driver and a lady in a very smart uniform walking up the front steps now. Okay, thank you, replied Marianne, about to end the call when Ronnie spoke again. Are Mum and Dad going to be told I'm alive? She sounded calm. Marianne shook their head, trying to prevent tears from forming. I don't know, lovely. Stay put until we tell you otherwise. Marianne ended the call. A few moments later, there was a knock on the door. Using an app on her phone, Marianne unlocked the door, walked up to it and swung it open, revealing a male and female police officer. Hello? We're here to see Mr. Gordon Oakley, said the male. I'm Inspector Briggs. This is Chief Constable Michelle Thornhill. I've been instructed to show you to the drawing room, said Marianne with a curt nod. He's on his way over. He's here. He answered the intercom, said Briggs, shaking his head. Marianne smiled. So can I. Held up the phone. From here. Follow me, please. They turned right towards the middle set of double doors on the far wall. Both officers looked round the impressive entrance hall as they walked through. Nice place, commented Briggs. Marianne smiled, opened the door for him and indicated a large pair of sofas that were facing each other. Take a seat. Mr. Oakley will be with you in a few minutes. Can I get you anything to drink? Not for me, said Briggs. Thornhill walked over to the sofa and sat down. "I will have a tea, please," she said. "Certainly," replied Marianne. "Are you sure I can't change your mind, Inspector Briggs?" "No," he said coldly, taking a seat next to his commanding officer. Marianne nodded, closed the door and dashed across to the library. They opened that door and saw Oakley pacing up and down between two cases of books. He glanced up at her, stopped walking and shook his head. "Well, tell him it's urgent!" Oakley shouted down the phone. Right, I just need to add something there because it's just a bit jarring. He glanced up at her, stopped walking and shook his head at her before someone started speaking to him. There was a pause. Then he shouted, "Well, tell him it's urgent," down the phone. "I need him to return my call immediately." There was a brief pause. "No, Sir Oliver Vaughan will not do." "I need to speak to the minister. I'm bloody sure he'll know why." Marianne whispered. "I'm going to get some tea," they said. "They're in the drawing room." Oakley nodded in acknowledgement. "Yes, this number. Thank you." He stabbed at the button to end the call and glanced at Marianne's retreating figure. "Coffee!" he yelled after them as an afterthought. He stepped out of the library, across to the office and opened the door. Ronnie was still sitting at the desk looking apprehensive. "Stay here for the moment," he snapped. "I will either phone you or send Marianne for you when we're ready." He was about to close the door when he noticed the expression on her face. "Are you all right?" Ronnie shook her head miserably. "I'm terrified they'll tell Mum and Dad that I'm here." Oakley nodded. "Yes, that thought has occurred to me as well. I just tried to get hold of Cockerell Wright to make sure that doesn't happen, but he's in a Cobra meeting and can't be disturbed. His office says they will ask him to call me as soon as he's out." He gave a rare grin. "It'll be okay." He closed the door again, and a smile slipped from his face. "I hope," he muttered under his breath. Right. Right, now that does tie up with what I'm saying here, so that's good. Oakley entered the drawing room through the middle doors and addressed the seated police officers. "Good afternoon. I'm Gordon Oakley of Arbor Associates. How can I help you?" The Chief Constable stood up, as did a colleague. "I'm Chief Constable Michelle Thornhill of Cumbria Police. This is Inspector David Briggs. We're here to ask about Miss Veronica Keane." Oakley nodded and sat down on the sofa opposite where the officer was standing, and they sat back down too. "I am happy to cooperate," he said slowly, "but you need to understand that part of what is happening here is an official secret. I am prepared to allow you to meet Miss Arden. I will also confirm that Miss Arden is the Veronica Keane that you are inquiring about. She is here entirely of her own volition. I also need to inform you that her life will potentially be in danger if it becomes public knowledge that she is still alive. Nobody can know. Unfortunately, that includes her immediate family." The Chief Constable inclined her head. "We were informed as such, but it seems cruel." Oakley gave her a steely glare. "Not as cruel as what would happen if they find out that she's alive. Someone could use Ronnie's parents to put pressure on her, or indeed anybody that is a past associate of hers." We are primarily here to identify the person who introduced Derek Cockle-Wright as Veronica Arden is Miss Keane, said Briggs forcefully. Can we see her, please? At that moment, Mary entered the room with a large silver tray, which they laid on the coffee table in front of the officers, as well as placing a black mug of coffee in front of Oakley. Thank you, Marianne, said Oakley. Could you please ask Ronnie to join us? Marianne nodded and left the room again, leaving one of the double doors ajar. Less than a minute later, Ronnie walked in. Marianne followed her, closing the doors behind them. Ronnie took the seat next to Oakley, facing the police officers. That will be all, Marianne, said Oakley. Marianne made to leave, but Ronnie spoke. I need them to stay. Chief Constable Thornhill had watched Ronnie closely as she entered the room. She had seen several photographs of the missing girl. This was unquestionably the young lady that they were here inquiring about. How can I help you? Asked Ronnie quietly. I would like to confirm that you are Veronica Alice Keane, the young lady who went missing from the Mansfield University campus on the 1st of January this year. Thornhill took off her hat and set it down on the coffee table. Ronnie's eyes were slightly red. Yeah, that's me. Briggs raised an eyebrow. Your parents think you're dead. Everyone thinks you're dead. A tear ran down Ronnie's cheek. Marianne handed her a tissue from behind. I know. Ronnie tried to dry her face, but the tears were still coming. If you are here under any kind of duress... Ronnie interrupted Briggs. I am not. I'm here of my own free will. She wiped her face again and glared back at the inspector. We can't tell you why, but telling them that I'm alive will put their lives in danger. We need to understand where you've been for the last 4 months. Thornhill tried to sound reassuring, but she was not very good at it. I don't think you could understand, said Oakley. And we are entering official secret territory. She has been here for the majority of that time. Did you come straight here to Forest Lodge? Asked Briggs. Ronnie looked at Oakley and raised her eyebrows, asking a silent question. Tell them what you like, he replied. Can I show them the tree? Oakley groaned. That would not be my first choice, no. Will you stop me? I won't stop you, but think about what you're doing, Ronnie. Tree? Asked Briggs. He was about to question them further when his phone started ringing. He pulled it from his pocket. Yes, there was a pause. We're here now. There were a few moments of silence, then Briggs replied, Yes, she's been identified as the missing girl. He covered the mouthpiece of his phone as he listened and mouthed sorry at the others. Then the expression on his face changed. You're kidding. How? I've only just told you it's definitely her. He looked over at Ronnie with a worried look on his face. I see. I'll tell them. He ended the call. That sounds like a problem, said Oakley, a dour look on his face. Briggs looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry to say that despite our orders, he paused, unsure what to say. What? Spat Oakley. Despite our instructions, Miss Keane's parents have been informed that she's alive right now. There would be some arse covering going on here. So I'm just going to find out what police force, because it isn't Cumbrian police, would be looking after. So, Cheltenham Police Force. Gloucestershire. Right, there we go. A little bit of blaming would go on here. Sorry to say that sounded like a problem, said Oakley, a dour look on his face. Briggs looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry to say that despite our orders, he paused, unsure what to say. What? Despite our instructions, Gloucestershire police have just informed Miss Keane's parents that she's alive. Ronnie raised a hand to her mouth. Oakley was about to shout when his phone started ringing. I've got to take this, he snapped. It's Derek Cockle-Wright. He jumped up and Marianne took a place on the sofa, putting a comforting arm around Ronnie, who was crying quietly into a tissue. Oakley ran into the hall and answered the phone. Minister, I've got a fucking problem. Cockle-Wright coughed. So have I. I've just been told that, despite instructions to the contrary, Miss Keane's parents have been informed that she's alive. I'm sorry, Mr. Oakley. I'm not sure what happened. Outside this place, you were the only person that knew, which leaves two possibilities. Cockle-Wright coughed again. Well, myself and Fiona McRae know, but she has nothing to gain from passing this on. Perhaps you're attempting to undermine her credibility. No, Mr. Oakley, I can assure you it's not that. If anything, we need her on side. We have the first evidence of a drop in oxygen in the atmosphere. We haven't told anyone yet, but there is a possibility that has leaked too. Carl Tucker has called a press conference for 7 this evening. He is telling the media that he has explosive proof of a government conspiracy to force through environmental policies. We think he knows, Mr. Oakley. Oakley shook his head. You've got a leak. There was a significant pause on the other end of the line. It rather looks like it. There is one other thing you must be aware of. It's being kept out of the news, so unless the source of the leak lets out this information as well, it needs to be kept quiet. Perhaps from Miss Arden as well, but that's up to you. Oh, today just gets better and better, sneered Oakley. Tell me. Miss Arden's friend, Daniel Huxley, has disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Oakley felt the blood drain from his face, and he pulled out the stool from the grand piano in the hall. He sat down. What happened? He went out for a drive. They found his car. I'm going to lose that he went out for a drive. They found his car wrecked but empty. This all feels coordinated. I discussed a contingency with Lord Farnborough that I now feel we need to put into place. I understand he's still unavailable? Yep, said Oakley. Then it's your decision. We're starting to get enough evidence to realise that what you told us is the truth. Oxygen levels are dropping. In the next couple of weeks it's going to look like autumn outside, even though it's mid-May. Even coniferous trees are going to shed their needles, which does not usually happen, not all at once anyway. We're finding dead plankton in the sea, and as a result lots of dead fish. The Cobra meeting today was about this and how we're going to respond. In short, we believe you, Mr. Oakley. But if Carl Tucker and his cronies have managed to find out too, then we have a major problem on our hands. We are not sure you we are not sure you will be safe. I want to provide military assistance to protect Forest Lodge and any other key Arbour Associates facilities. If you agree, I will have a unit with you and the ambassador in a couple of hours. Nice of Lord Farnborough to go through all the contingencies with me. Are you sure he cannot be reached? He's being briefed by Idrisil. It says Oakley, so I'm going to say snapped. As in, he's in a tree. Yes. That sounds mad. I know. So you have to decide. It's all set up. You will have a military unit to protect you and a liaison officer permanently stationed with you. The faster you decide, the quicker we can help you. Cockerell Wright, for once, sounded completely sincere. Do it, said Oakley after a cogitative pause. I'll let the others know. What are you going to do about Veronica's parents? We haven't decided yet. Make sure you keep them safe. It's bad enough that someone potentially has Danny as a bargaining tool. You need to make sure they don't get her to her parents as well. Cockerell Wright paused. You're right. I'll arrange to have them taken into protective custody. Could they stay with you? Kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Oakley shook his head. Absolutely not. I need Miss Arden focused. This is going to be hard enough now without them being here. That's going to be hard enough now without them being here. Are you going to tell her about Mr. Huxley? Asked Cockerell Wright. I haven't decided, replied Oakley, but no, probably not. Probably not. Not yet. Hang on, that's a bit weirdly worded. But probably not. Not yet, at any rate. Do me another favour. I have the police here now talking to Miss Arden. Get rid of them. I'll get on to it. Which force? Cumbrian. We have the police. We have the chief constable here, herself here. I will see what I can do. Thank you, said Oakley. Goodbye, Minister. Thank you, said Oakley. Goodbye, Minister. He hit the button to end the call. He did not want to get into the habit of lying to Ronnie, but he was not sure the truth was going to help her right now. Frowning, he pocketed the phone, stood there thinking for a few moments, then walked slowly back to the drawing room. Marianne was still sitting next to Ronnie with their arms around their shoulders. The police officers were watching, not saying anything. A moment later, Oakley entered the room. Marianne stood to move out of the way, but Oakley waved them down. We have an issue, said Oakley. There is a leak at DEFRA. We think that someone is responsible for distributing the information that's put Mackenzie's life in danger. Also, your parents, he said, looking directly at Ronnie. Cockerell Wright is arranging for them to be taken into immediate protective custody. He looked across at the 2 police officers. You are going to have to leave. Now. The Minister is arranging some additional security for us. You do not have clearance to be here. I'm not satisfied that the young lady is not here under duress, stated Thornhill as a hand moved across to retrieve a hat from the table. Ronnie stood up. What do you want me to say? I want to be here. I don't want my parents to know my life, but you've already messed that up, haven't you? The reason I'm here is something I'm not allowed to discuss, but it is rather important. Please don't get any ideas that I am coming with you to discuss this further, because I'm not. She glared across at the Chief Constable, who tried to return the gaze with equal intensity but failed. Briggs's phone rang. Yes, he sat there for a few seconds. Says who? He snapped when the other person had finished speaking. He listened to the answer, then acknowledged the message with a curt "very well then," and ended the call. The Minister of DEFRA, Derek Cocklewright, has just called Mum to inform us that we need to leave immediately and that a detachment from the army is on the way to secure this facility. Briggs shook his head. Thornhill stood and placed a hat on her head. Can you give us any idea what the hell is going on? She demanded. Nope, said Oakley. Please leave now. Ronnie stood up. Have you noticed that the trees are behaving like it's autumn like there? Thornhill looked over to her. Of course, who hasn't? She frowned again. Is it to do with that? Just watch the news at 7 o'clock, said Oakley. I'm sure it will all be clear then. He walked over to the double doors that led into the hall and opened them both wide. Now, if you please. The officer stood and left the room. Ronnie called after Oakley. Mr. Oakley, what do you mean watch the news? I'll see them out, then I'll tell you everything I'll know. Then I'll tell you everything I know, he stated, while he reflected almost everything. Okay, that's fine. Oh, shall I do the last chapter? I might as well, and then I actually have hit the target I set myself for this month. But let me grammarialise this one first. So file export to Word. And then Grammarly. No, that's exactly what I meant to say. I'm keeping that. Every single comma, it's misunderstood what it's there for in those last two, so I'm going to stick to me guns. Bloody quickly. I am going to lose the really in this case and just go for the bloody quickly. Right, so that's fine. 93%, yeah, I'll live with that. I don't think I need to pay for it if it's going to give me that score. Right, so let's just drag that there, minimise that, open that, copy that, paste it into here. Copy it. And make sure I've got the right file open here, which I have. Paste, reformat, done. Right. Okay, so that's chapter 19 signed off. Oh, I'm actually going to hit my target for the month. I didn't think I was. But I am. Right, let me just bin those. And drag that into there. Oop. And open chapter 20. This isn't as long as that last chapter, so I can get this done in this session. Actually, hasn't been too long. Right then, chapter 20, Champions of Free Enterprise. Once he ensured that the police officer had left and the gate was secured behind them, Oakley ordered everybody into the study. There he told them that there was a leak at Defra, which was probably the reason why Mackenzie had been attacked, that Ronnie's parents had been informed that she was alive, as well as the probable contents of the news conference that Carl Tucker was holding later that evening. He told them that the government scientists had confirmed there was a tiny but measurable decrease in the oxygen levels around the planet. He also informed them that Derek Cockle-Wright was sending some army troops to Forest Lodge to enhance their security. Ronnie went to her room to think. Marianne went with her. Ursula sat down in the garden room with some shortbread and a cup of tea and watched the news. Oakley kept rushing in and out of the room, his phone to his ear, barking orders at some and talking less calmly to others. The media was full of speculation about the contents of Carl Tucker's conference. That kind of feels like it should be a separate paragraph. The media's full speculation about the content of Carl Tucker's press conference. At 10 to 7, Oakley entered the garden room. Ursula was knitting and watching a news channel. "Are you okay, dear?" she asked. "Not really," replied Oakley. "I need to tell you something before I call the others down to watch the news conference. Daniel Huxley has vanished under suspicious circumstances." Ursula had been dividing attention between the television and the colourful sock that was starting to form on her knitting needles, but as soon as he said the name, she looked straight up and placed the knitting onto her knees. "Oh my." "Quite. Is it related to all of this?" she asked. "It would be an enormous coincidence if it weren't," stated Oakley. Ursula nodded. "Poor Danny. He's lovely. I'd hate for anything bad to happen to him. It would hurt Ronnie as well. Remember, it was not her parents who she insisted on revealing that she was alive to. It was Danny." "What does he know?" "Enough," said Ursula, running her fingers through her grey hair. "He understands what Ronnie has to do. He knows that she interfaced with Idrisil. Even knows which tree." "Could he have told anybody?" "No," said Ursula, "not voluntary anyway. He's a Yukunda. He promised that he would never betray us, and he never will. So he's been taken because someone discovered his link to Ronnie, not because he said something indiscreet." Ursula nodded. "Ronnie's had enough shocks for one day," said Oakley quietly. "She needs to know this, but not yet." Ursula smiled slightly. "I understand." Oakley shook his head sadly. "Ronnie is so strong, and we need her to continue to be. We have to make this work, Ursula. I know that we're a tiny cog in a huge machine, but that young lady is our best chance of cutting through all the bullshit and making it happen here at least. I respect and admire her, and I'm not saying we should never tell her. I just don't think now is the right time. She's had enough bad news today." Ursula nodded. "I don't think we should keep it from her for long, but I agree. She's had a difficult enough day." "Thank you," said Oakley with a grim smile. He looked at the television screen, which was showing a weather forecast. "It's almost time. I'll go and get them." A few minutes later, Ursula, Oakley, Ronnie and Marianne were sitting in the garden room in front of the large screen. It was just after 7 and the broadcasters were speculating whilst transmitting a shot of an empty podium. It was marked with the logo of the Red Victors organisation, a stylized city skyline made from recognisable silhouettes of buildings from across the United Kingdom, dark grey at the top and fading to black at the bottom, with the words Red Victors underneath in white, where the silhouettes met, forming a solid black line. Underneath the logo were the words "The Champions of Free Enterprise" in crimson. The various media were commenting on the fact that the press conference was running late. A wider shot showed an audience of journalists sitting in rows before the podium. A man and 2 women stepped through the door behind the podium. Through a door at the back of the room, because I think we've said podium too quickly. The man was of medium height, had a wiry build and close-cropped ginger hair, as well as stubble around his mouth, chin and cheeks. He was wearing a pair of thin-framed rectangular spectacles and a dark grey suit with a red tie and white shirt. The women were dressed similarly to each other, although it was nothing so formal as a uniform. The women hung back by the door and Carl Tucker stepped gingerly to the podium. He had a smug look on his face as he laid the folder he was carrying onto the stand. He adjusted the microphone carefully, pulling it towards his face, aware that the room was silent. He smiled at the waiting audience and slowly, deliberately, opened the folder. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, looking at the crowd and directly into the camera that he knew was transmitting his every word to people around the country and probably beyond. "Thank you for attending." He gave a deliberately dramatic pause. "Today I'm going to share details of a conspiracy with you. A conspiracy much bigger than anything that has ever happened in this country or the world before. The government are involved in a deception that they're going to use as an excuse to force through policies that will drastically curtail our freedoms. all under the guise of environmentalism. He tried to keep a straight face as he uttered the final word, although he was unable to prevent a slight sneer from passing his lips. Oakley shook his head. "I've told the minister he has a leak." Ursula shushed him with an intense look. "I have received some information from a high level in government," continued Tucker after a pause. "They are working together with an environmental pressure group by the name of Arbor Associates, who we believe are the driving force behind this. Arbor Associates is an enormous international conglomerate that, over the last 2 centuries, has been acquiring wealth and influence all over the world. The chairman of the United Kingdom is a member of our House of Lords, Lord Farnborough. He is also the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State and a close advisor to the Right Honourable Derek Cockle-Wright, the Minister for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs." Tucker paused again and glared down into the television cameras. "In my opinion, Arbor Associates has an undue level of influence over the minister, but what is even more appalling is they've managed to convince people much higher up in government of the veracity of what they are saying. This influence has reached the office of our Prime Minister. She is preparing, even as we speak, to launch a package of measures that will change everything for everyone." Tucker looked down at his notes and made a deliberate point of turning the page slowly. He looked up at the seated journalists and then returned his eyes to the television camera. "What they are proposing is shocking and disproportionate. I would like to point out that some of the things I'm about to tell you are in the planning stages. They have an end result in mind, even if they've not decided exactly how to reach that point yet." He deliberately widened his eyes, took off his glasses for a moment and rubbed his forehead before returning the spectacles to his face. "You're going to love these, folks," he said. Marion leaned forward. "I wonder how accurate these are going to be," they said. Ronnie hugged a cushion that she had pulled from behind her on the sofa. "I have a horrible feeling they're going to be spot on," she murmured. Oakley nodded in agreement. "Firstly, they wish to reduce the population of the country," stated Tucker. "And what would be a reasonable reduction, do you think? A few million? A half? 3/4? No. Our government are going to set a target of a maximum population of 7 million for this country." Tucker took his glasses off again. "Let that sink in. The country currently has a population of just under 70 million. They want to get rid of 90% of us. And how, pray tell, are they going to do this? I can only speculate. My source says they intend to drastically reduce the birth rate by taxing the living daylights of anybody who reproduces without a licence." The camera was on a wide shot, and the journalists in the room were yelling loud questions at him. Some were standing up. Tucker returned his glasses to his face. "If I could have a bit of quiet, please. I do not have any detail of how they intend to achieve this, but it can only be by removal of a basic human right, which is to be able to reproduce and create a family when you want to." He waited for the room to settle. In front of the television, Oakley was frowning. "Well, that's 1 out of 4. The noise in the room abated. "The next thing they're planning is to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Over the next 10 years, the government are going to hike the prices of petrol and diesel. They will publish the increases in advance and encourage people to reduce the length of their commute. Within 10 years, petrol will be unaffordable to all but the ultra-rich. The additional revenue raised through tax increases will be used to substantially increase the availability of public transport, which will be nationalised and reduce the prices to make them affordable. There is also talk of a maximum distance that you will be allowed to travel to go to work." He looked up from his notes. "Good this, isn't it? I don't remember of any of it from their manifesto." 2 out of 4, said Ronnie. "He should talk about planes next." "Now," continued Tucker once the uproar had settled again, "I love my foreign holidays, but it seems those two will be a thing of the past." Tucker smiled again. "Flights must be reduced by 99%. It is reasonable to assume that any flights allowed under the new rules will be military and cargo. Going on holiday or visiting family abroad will be a thing of the past." Tucker drummed his fingers on the podium. "I'm told that someone asked Arbor what you should do if you want to see family who live abroad. They were told to talk to them online." Oakley glared up at the screen. "That's worrying," he said. "Why?" asked Ronnie. "I'll tell you when he's done," grunted Oakley. "The internet," stressed Tucker. "If you don't live in the same country as your family, the government are advocating never seeing them again. Tucker gave a theatrical pause and looked around the room at the journalists. A couple stuck up their hands, but he shook his head. "Questions at the end." The hands went down. "The final thing will upset anybody who likes variety in their diet. Even the vegans amongst us must at least acknowledge that they choose not to use animal products, but would not like this choice to be forced on everyone." He smiled. Or maybe there are some militant vegans out there, I don't know. There were some murmurs in the room and Tucker held up his hand. That was a joke. What is not a joke is that the government intend to force a plant-based diet upon us in the next 10 years, again by forcing the price of meat up until regular people like you, and yes, even me, cannot afford it. He stared out across the room. We at the Red Victor organisation strongly believe in free enterprise. I'm not ever going to tell my vegan friends that they are wrong because it is their right to choose how they live. These proposals will destroy this country. Our airline industry will be decimated. We have several sites across the country where cars are built. These jobs and industries will be destroyed by these proposals. And what about the dairy farmers? How will they exist when their farms are geared up to the production of milk and meat? What the government are proposing is going to change the life of every person in this room, in this country. And what if you want a child? What is their plan to ensure that we slash the rate of reproduction? Taxes won't do the trick. How do you tell a teenage couple that have discovered sex for the first time that they cannot afford their child? Do you sterilise them? Do you force the poor girl to have an abortion? I don't know. Whilst I know urgent discussions are going on behind closed doors at this moment... The screen went blank and then the news channel cut back to the studio. Well, I'm sorry, but we seem to have lost the feed from the news conference, a female presenter said. We have asked the government for someone to come and talk to us about these allegations. In the meantime, we have an environmental expert, Darren Edwards, from Friends of the Earth, on the line. Darren. Oakley hit the mute button and turned the volume down. Interesting, he said finally. More like terrifying, stated Ronnie. What he said was in the same order in which we discussed it with the minister. More than that, said Oakley grimly. Someone from that meeting room is the source of the leak. You think Mackenzie? Asked Marianne wearily. Oakley raised his hands before him in a placatory fashion. No. Well, I suppose it's feasible, but I don't think so. Did you hear what Mr. Tucker said about visiting family in other countries? Marianne thought back. He said about limiting contact to the internet. Oakley nodded. Do you recall what you said in the meeting, Ronnie? Ronnie scratched up her eyes. It was one of the questions we rehearsed. I said if you want to see family abroad, you should move there, or they move here, or limit your contact to the virtual. Yes, said Oakley smugly, which, apart from substituting virtual for internet, is word for word what he just said, Ronnie. Whoever briefed our friend Carl Tucker quoted you directly, which means they were in that meeting. The leak must have been one of the civil servants that were there, Theresa Burke or Sir Oliver Vaughan. His phone started to ring. He glanced at the screen. That's the minister now, he said, standing up and walking to the doors overlooking the garden. He answered the call. Oakley. It's Derek Cockrell Wright. Have you just watched the news conference? Oakley grimaced. Of course. I can assure you had nothing to do with leaking that information. The PM is going nuts right now. We have no idea how to deal with this. It was someone in that room, Minister, said Oakley gently. We have come to the same conclusion, said the Minister hastily. Oakley shook his head. There are three obvious candidates. Mackenzie. Not him, snapped Oakley. I didn't think you'd go for that. If he was the source of the leak, then that might explain the attempt on his life, though. He does need to be spoken to, even if it's just to rule him out. Well, good luck finding him, sneered Oakley. He managed to contact his brother, though, without you knowing? Yes, he did. When we recovered his mobile, there'd been no attempt to hide that contact. He hadn't deleted call logs or anything like that. I've examined everything he did on that phone. Nothing else was suspicious. I will have to take your word for that, said Cockrell Wright. So if it wasn't one of your lot, and it wasn't me, then it was one of the civil servants in the room. We are pursuing that now. You'll let me know what you find out, asked Oakley. On the condition that you let us talk to Mackenzie when and if you find him. Agreed, said Oakley. Also, I've sped up the army. The ones that were going to arrive late tonight are still on their way. However, I've also sent some Marines by helicopter from RAF Spade Adam, so they should be with you in the next few minutes. I assume they can land in your garden? There's room, said Oakley, but it'd better not damage Marianne's roses or there'll be hell to pay. Marianne looked up at the mention of their name and gave a slight smile. I will call you as soon as I have an update, said Cockrell Wright. Oakley grunted and entered the call. Oakley turned and faced the others. We're about to have visitors, he said. A small detachment of Marines is about to arrive by helicopter from RAF Spade Adam. There will be more arriving later. Ronnie stood up. It's going to be a long night then. Very likely, said Oakley. Call me when they get here. I'll be in the office making some calls. He left via the kitchen, a scowl crossing his face as he did so. Ronnie moved to the window and looked out across the garden. Marianne joined her and opened one of the bay windows. The only sound from outside was the rustle of leaves in the wind. I didn't think this was going to be easy, Ronnie said quietly, but I'd no idea it was going to get this out of control this quickly. We had planned for several contingencies, Marianne said as they stood scanning the tree line at the far end of the garden. The sun was low in the sky and the pair of them were aware of a new, slightly mechanical sound in the distance. Ronnie cocked her head slightly, listening intently. Do you think that's it? She asked. Yes, said Marianne. Neither of them had noticed Ursula standing up and walking over to them. She had her mobile phone in her hand. She listened to the noise and raised her eyebrows. Do you think that's it, dear? She said. The question was aimed at Marianne, who nodded. Probably. Which way will it come from? Asked the old lady. Spade Adam is northeast of here, said Marianne, and the house faces almost north, slightly to the east. As long as they come in a straight line, they'll probably be obscured from view by the house until they're almost on top of us. The noise was getting louder. They were joined at the windows a few seconds later by Oakley, who was still wearing a grim expression. That will be them. The officer in charge is Captain Greening. Is a Captain Greening, I think I'm going to say. Ursula pulled a mobile phone out of her pocket. I wondered how to make a video on this thing. I want to record it landing. Marianne smiled and showed her what she needed to do. Oakley looked amused for a moment before taking Ronnie to one side. You may have already guessed this, young lady, but this is all about protecting you. You are our prime asset at this point. It should have been both me and Mackenzie, said Ronnie. Ronnie said sadly. Yes, it should. Let's not go over that again. This is one of the contingencies we planned for. Arbor Associates being exposed? Oakley nodded. Kind of. I think we even used the Red Victor organisation in our hypothetical scenario. Things are evolving quickly, but the most important thing right at this moment is to keep you safe. You are Idrisil's ambassador after all. When the Marines arrive, you will have a personal security detail. You will do exactly as they say. If for some reason they think it is necessary to get you away from here, then that's what we do. You must obey their instructions without question. Ronnie frowned and looked over to Ursula and Marianne. What about them? They have to be kept safe too. And of course they will be, but you are our priority. If it comes down to choice of protecting them or me or you, then our choice and directives are clear. There are some operations that you have not been directly involved with that we haven't explained to you. We do have another facility, much larger than this one, which is where you'll be taken if the security of this house is ever compromised. You can't take me and not them. Ronnie folded her arms and glared at Oakley. I have no intention of being a martyr or sacrificing either Marianne or Ursula, snapped Oakley. We are talking about worst-case scenarios here. I'm not a callous man, Ronnie. Whatever you may think of me, I do value all of our lives very highly indeed, especially my own. But if it's a choice of protecting us or you, it's you. No argument. Ronnie shook her head. I will hold you personally responsible if anything happens to them. Oakley shook his head and gave a rare smile. Believe me, young lady, the only way anything will happen to them is if something happens to me first. Right, said Ronnie, smiling and nodding sarcastically. A look of regret crossed Oakley's face. I don't think you've ever thought of me as anything other than a hired gun, have you? Ronnie's expression softened. I know there's more to you than that, but sometimes you're so matter-of-fact, Oakley interrupted, because I have to be. Now promise me that if we have a serious situation, you will do as you're told. None of your bravado. These people are here to keep you alive. If you do not only will you place yourself in greater danger, but you'll be putting our lives at risk as well. You don't want someone else's death on your conscience, believe me. The sound of the helicopter was much louder now. It seemed to be coming from immediately above the house. Marianne ushered Ursula into the garden. She was holding the camera in front of her and pointing at the patch of grass Marianne had indicated the helicopter would land on. Ronnie stood looking up into the sky until the helicopter came into view approximately 200 feet above them. She felt a moment of exhilaration that all this was for her until the reality kicked back in and she remembered Oakley's stark warning. Oakley tapped her shoulder. I promise I will make sure they are safe, he said, but you need to play the game. It's for your own good, you know. Ronnie gave in. She looked guiltily up at the helicopter, which was descending slowly towards the centre of the garden. I'm going to say lawn instead of garden. This is the centre of the lawn. Okay, she said. The four watched as the large machine descended the last 30 feet or so. It's a puma, said Oakley to nobody in particular. The wheels touched down gently onto the grass, and as soon as all movement had stopped, the loud noise from the rotors quietened down a little as they were turned off. The helicopter had been a lot bigger than Ronnie had pictured. I'm going to say imagined. And there was a large sliding door on the side which opened up. A tall man with slightly grey hair sticking out from under his beret stepped down confidently. His uniform was plain green with a white belt. He looked around them, saw the group observing him from outside the garden room, and strode towards them. 3 further uniformed Marines stepped down behind him. They were all carrying rifles and wearing green khaki combat uniforms and their berets. The 4 stalked towards the house. Oliver stepped forward. Captain Greening, I'm Mr. Oakley. I represent Arbor Associates until Lord Farnborough returns. Greening had a thin face and his voice had a steely edge. Where is he and when is he expected to return? Oakley smiled. If I told you where he was, you would think I was crazy. We do not know exactly when to expect him. And which one of these is the asset? Greening gave a slight smile, but it transformed his face, at least until Ronnie spoke. I didn't think people spoke like that in real life, she snapped. I am Veronica Arden, ambassador to Idrisil, Empress of the Trees. I'm not an asset, I'm a person. Greening ignored her comments. Miss Arden, this is Lance Corporal Barrera. He's in charge of your security detail. One of these people will be with you or close to you at all times. In an emergency, you must obey them fully and without question. If there is a threat to your life, these men will keep you alive. Ronnie glared across at Barrera, who saluted her. He was in his mid-20s, she guessed, with dark hair and a slight olive tinge to his skin. The other two were wearing the single inverted V on the uniforms that indicated they were privates. One of them looked almost the same age as her, with close-cropped brown hair and red cheeks. She noticed some shock that he was glowing. One of the security detail was a Yakunda. She had not expected that. Miss, said Barrera. There was a slight hint of a European accent in his voice. Please will you show me to your room? Why? Ronnie, snapped Oakley. It's for a security suite. It's for a security suite, ma'am, nothing more, said the soldier, rolling her eyes. Ronnie motioned to Lance Corporal Barrera to follow her. All three Marines marched into the house after her. Oakley pointed to Marianne. This is Marianne, our systems expert. Whilst I know how the security systems in the house work, and for some reason it's got housework as one word. Whilst I know how the security systems in the house work, Marianne understands how they work. They are the best person to explain them to you and give you access. They, snapped Greenie, is there more than one of her? Marianne blinked and shot a hateful glance at the soldier. They is my choice of pronoun, Captain. Greenie nodded. No offence meant. I have a system specialist on board. He glanced back towards the helicopter. A further 8 soldiers had disembarked and were all pulling crates and boxes from the guts of the machine. That's him now. Corporal Steele. She pointed to a soldier with bright ginger hair who was directing a couple of the lower ranks where to put things. We have a mobile HQ on the way which will need to be admitted through the front gate as soon as it arrives, which will be later tonight. He called Steele over and introduced him to Marianne. Oakley looked at the large amounts of equipment being unloaded from the helicopter. Is this not overkill? He asked. Greening smiled, and again his face transformed into something much more friendly. We're just a decoy. Outside there will be a special forces unit watching what is going on here. If things go well, you won't even know they're there. And if they don't go well? Greening grinned. We have a lot of very big guns. Oakley watched the captain march into the house. Swell, he spat. Barrera and the other 2 soldiers followed Ronnie up the flight of stairs and turned left at the top through the double doors that led into her suite. Barrera stood politely at the threshold until Ronnie asked him in. He looked around. He's not a vampire, don't worry. He looked around him with a perturbed expression on his face. The 2 young soldiers had looked rather impressed with the hallway and stairs, but were now standing silently on either side of the open double doors. Barrera looked around him. Ahead and to the left, past the vestibule, was the main bedroom. He looked through the doors ahead of him and walked into the large dressing room before turning right into the bathroom. Ronnie watched him disappear out of view for a few seconds before returning through the dressing room doors and into the vestibule. This whole suite is yours, he asked. Ronnie nodded. It's very nice, miss, but not very practical. He gestured to the other shoulders. Vickers, Hardiman, take a look round, find something better. Ronnie tried not to roll her eyes, but she had a feeling that she failed as she watched the 2 younger soldiers departing through the double doors. I can't stay in here. Barrera shook his head. Ideally not. Not ideally not. I don't think he would be quite so. No chance. Not a chance. Not a chance. One of us has to stay immediately outside your room at all times. He gestured to the window and door to the right hand that led outside to the balcony that overlooked the garden. Not only is there another entrance from outside, but there are 4 windows looking into the suite as well. I want you in a more normal room. Ideally 1 door, 1 window. Ronnie pulled a face for a second. There is a bedroom on the next floor, part of a suite that fills the whole floor. There is only 1 door to the bedroom. It's just nothing through to the outside. And the only windows are skylights. Mackenzie's room. Marianne would not be happy, but it met the requirements Barrera had described. Show me. Veronica nodded and walked through the double doors back onto the landing. Vickers and Hardiman were coming out of different rooms. Barrera called to them, follow us, lads. Ronnie led them through the door in front of her and up the flight of steps. She opened the door to the left, and the soldiers followed her. Here, the room had been tidied after Mackenzie had left them, a job that had no doubt been done by Marianne. As Ronnie had said, there was only one door in, and the light came in through a triple skylight in the sloped ceiling above the door. Bro looked around him and nodded his approval. Much better, miss. Are you allowed to call me Ronnie? We can address you however you want to be addressed, miss. Then I'm Ronnie, not miss. She turned round to Vickers and Hardman. That goes for you two as well, understood? Yes, Ronnie, said Hardman with a cheeky grin. Do you want anything moved up here? Asked Barrera. Not much, said Ronnie, although my dressing room... the dressing room in my suite is massive, there are not all that many clothes in there. I'll bring those up, and the laptop in the bedroom. She paused reflectively. I don't have much else. I came here rather unexpectedly. There was a brief moment of silence before Barrera barked at the others. Well, you heard her. Contents of the wardrobe up here now, sir, Vickers and Hardman said simultaneously before leaving the room. Ronnie sat down on the chair by the dressing table and faced Barrera. Tell me about the younger lad. I'm just going to... Vickers, Mum. Call me Ronnie. If Vickers is the younger one, then yes. Tell me about him. Barrera frowned. Can I ask why? Ronnie glanced at the door where the two young soldiers had left the room. He's a good soldier. Barrera looked vaguely annoyed. Of course he is. He wouldn't be here otherwise. Why'd you ask? Ronnie was not sure what she should say. I can't see him being the type to kill anyone. That's all. He was a Yakunda. Whilst it was not impossible for a Yakunda to kill, she thought it was unlikely. Vickers is a good soldier, Miss Ronnie. Just Ronnie. He's a good lad. Why'd you ask? He's not a killer, said Ronnie simply. One of my gifts is that I can recognise people who are essentially good, for want of a better way of describing it. You're saying the rest of us aren't? Barrera had a slight expression on his face, and Ronnie was fairly sure he was joking with her. I just want to be sure that, if he is supposedly here to protect me, that he is capable of doing so. And that says that, but so would be better. Of doing so. He is, stated Barrera. Vickers and Hardman entered the room at that moment with arms full of clothes and hangers. On the bed, please. I'll put them away. I'll put them away. Just make that a contraction. I'll put them away. Her eyes were drawn to the glow that surrounded Private Vickers, and he stood and he looked away, slightly embarrassed as he deposited the clothes on the bed. One more run should do it, said Hardman, and the two left the room again. Ronnie opened the wardrobe, Mackenzie's wardrobe, and started to hang her clothes. Yay! I think, well, I'll run this through Grammarly, but then that's it. That's me done. And I've hit my target for the month, despite having done bugger all for the last 2 weeks. Right, so let me do this. So file, export to Word. Okay, let's drag it into Grammarly again. Remember, it was not apparent that she was alive too. It was Danny. It was not apparent she insisted on telling she was alive. Remember, it was not her parents who insisted on telling that she was... That's better. Chairman of. I have a result in mind. What score is it giving me? What overall score? 91, yeah, I'll have that. Right, so finally, let's download it. Let's drag it up there. Let's minimize you. Let's open you. Let's copy you. Let's pop you into there. Okay, and finally, no. So that's the correct chapter. Right, there we go. Blimey, literally at the last minute. Well, I say last minute. Technically, there's tomorrow as well, but I'm not going to be. I'm going to be working tomorrow, so I don't think I'll get much done. So let me just drag this chapter into the edited chapters folder. God, come on, Apple, be less annoying. There we go. Right, so I've got 23 chapters left to edit. I think I'm going to have to give myself a fairly easy... Well, let me do the podcast now, actually. Let me do today's podcast. It's just... Now, I need to mess around with some settings, I think, because I'm guessing if I do that, nothing will happen. Yep. Oh, can I just change it to that? Are you going to work now, you horrible bastard? Oh, it did. That's good. Right. So it is. Hello, today is Friday the 30th of May 2025 and you are listening to the Diary of a Wannabe Writer. Sorry I didn't do a podcast yesterday. I wasn't in the mood and couldn't think of anything to say. And I'd say my mental health isn't brilliant at the moment, so I got to the point where I couldn't face coming on and saying, no, I'm not going to do anymore. In fact, I strongly considered coming on today's podcast and saying, do you know what, I'm not getting any writing done. I don't really want to do a podcast every day that says why I haven't done writing, an excuse podcast as I call it. So I'm going to take a break. And then for some reason, out of the blue, I was in the mood to do some writing today. So I have actually managed at the last moment to get chapters 17 through 20 signed off in a Twitch stream that I've literally just finished it and I'm recording this podcast as part of that stream. So, and yeah, I'm quite pleased with it actually. So there were a couple of little moments. Do you remember I talked about something that happened, something Marianne did, oh God, see, I can't even say it again. Anyway, I removed the moment that I was mulling over. I think I did a podcast called Hand, where I discussed sort of what I decided to add to the book, and then like the next podcast was called No Hand because I decided to remove it. Well, I hadn't actually physically done the work of removing it from chapter 16 that moment, but I have now, so it's gone. And I proceeded to edit effectively what is the first 4 chapters of part 3 of the book, Skuld, today. And yeah, I'm pleased with them actually. So some quite important things happen, but I think I'm going to like the next chapters more because I really like the Mackenzie character. And he only appears briefly in the 4 chapters I've just edited, which kind of makes sense because he's no longer with the rest of my lead characters. He's not at Forest Lodge in Cumbria. He's back at home in Scotland. I don't know why I tried to do that accent there, but it's because when I do the live stream and I'm reading them out, I do make a terrible attempt to do the Scottish accents. But yeah, so out of the blue, I've been really productive today. And as I say, I was considering announcing a break. But actually, I've enjoyed what I've done today. And there's even a tiny chance I will start work on chapter 21 later today. Now, bearing in mind chapters 17, 18, 19 and 20, I had already read through on screen in detail. And when I edit, as I've said probably a lot of times before, so apologies if I'm repeating myself, it's a two-stage process. So the first stage is me reading it on screen several times until I don't want to make any more changes, which I had done with chapters 17 to 20. And then the second stage is what I call my paper edit, where I print it out and go through it and I read it out loud, quite often on a Twitch stream, but not always. But I read it out loud, make sure I like it and make any changes. And the reality was there were no major changes that needed to be made to those 4 chapters today. So I read through them. I changed the odd word here and there. There were some minor things that I altered, but generally there wasn't anything I felt I needed to change. And so, yeah, so we're done. So let's have a quick look whilst I'm here at my documents. What's next? So I've got chapter 21 next, which is called Interludes. Let's have a quick look. We've been told that Danny has gone missing in the previous chapter. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm just responding to Angel Faye, who's just put well done, messaged me to say well done, which obviously if you're just listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see. We see Danny in the next chapter. It's quite a long chapter, the next one. We meet a couple more new characters, some bad guys. And we meet George and Annie's parent, George and Annie again. So yeah, the stuff I like, but the stuff I really like, there's a bit where Carruthers has to try and work out where Mackenzie is, and I really like that chapter because Carruthers as a character, I love him now he's not in his alcoholic phase. I really like writing for the character because he's very direct and a bit rude, but ultimately has a heart of gold. In my head, he's played by Peter Capaldi, who people will know. Well, he's been in loads of stuff. He's done that series on Sky recently, hasn't he? I think he's been in one of the DC movies. But of course, he will be largely remembered as the fabulous 12th Doctor Who. And also for people who like certain kinds of comedy, he'll remembered as the officious Malcolm Tucker from The Thick of It. And also I think there was a movie based on The Thick of It, which he played that character as well. So yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I've named Carl Tucker after Malcolm Tucker. That's a deliberate thing. My bad guy in this book is called Carl Tucker, and the Tucker definitely was a homage to the vile Malcolm Tucker from The Thick of It. So yeah, very pleased with how today's gone. I'm going to Nairobi tomorrow. It's quite a long flight. Probably won't be at the hotel till about 8 or 9 o'clock, but I will try and do a podcast tomorrow. Because I may have done a bit more right. It would be nice to have read through chapter 19, even if it's not signed off. Sorry, chapter 21, even if it's not signed off, it'd be nice to have done the, some of the proofreading on screen. So that's me done for today, and so hopefully I'll do a podcast tomorrow. Hopefully I'll get back into the habit of doing it every day, not every other day like it has been fairly recently. I'm going to talk very quickly about I can talk about my plan for June tomorrow. That'll give me something to talk about then, my June targets. So thank you for listening, and I'll be back at some point tomorrow, probably later in the day. Thank you, bye-bye. Right, that's done. Let me just add the music to it. Documents. No, I'm not quite. I'm almost done. I am going to go soon. I haven't had a chance to read your book yet. I've been weirdly in a strange mental health place, and I'm kind of only just coming. I'll be going quite soon. Don't worry. No, that was me saying goodbye on the podcast, which I was recording. Sorry. Although I will be going soon, I now need to add opening and closing music. You probably came to me in the middle of me recording the podcast, so didn't hear me saying that's what I was doing. So let's just do opening music and closing music. It won't be long, to be fair, but not quite yet. Let me just drag those around. So intro. Excellent. Yeah, we're quite supportive. People will try and support each other on here, which is quite nice. That's a bit weird. Hang on, just let me and attempts to become a professional writer. Oh, good grief. I've managed to put the opening and closing theme to the first series on this episode by mistake. So let me try and find, because I've gone to the wrong folder, that's why. I want podcast audio. And there we go. Oh, you can't see that I'm recording the podcast as well because I've got it on the wrong screen, which doesn't help. And my control software's just crashed. There we go. Let me just check that's right. Hello, today is Friday the... Hello, today is Friday the... No, I normally have the audio cutting in well before that, so... So there. Oh, sugar. I've just pressed the wrong button. Oh, it's still in the right place there, so let me just move that so it's there. There we go. Yeah, I haven't been on Twitch for a while. So when I'm not in the right place to write, I don't tend to stream very much. And as I say, even my podcast has been intermittent over the last few days, although hopefully I'll solve that now. Right, let's just make sure that's my June targets. So, thank you for listening, and I'll be back at some point tomorrow, probably later in the day. Thank you, bye-bye. You have been listening to the... Let's just take that a bit further. Right, so file, export as MP3. Today's date is 30/05/25. Save. Right, that's the podcast. Good. Done. Let's drag it into there because I need to schedule it using my phone. Let's delete the old ones because I don't need those. And those. Right. So. Let's have a look. So that can close down for a second. Let me just go on to here. So it's show number 123. Back on track. 30th May 2025. I talk about the editing I finally managed to do today. ... So that's fine. Yes, that's there. That's there. It's season 2, episode 123. Done. Put the correct photo on. Done and save. Right. I didn't actually need to save. I meant to upload, but never mind. So, has it got the right number? Right, so today's podcast is published. That is probably just about all I'm going to do today. Mind you, I've been streaming for almost bang on 3 hours now, which is, yeah, well, I got it all done. So, yes, I shall be back. I doubt I'll be streaming tomorrow because I'm working all day, and when I get to the hotel in the evening, I shall probably want to sleep. On the other hand, I might not be tired, and internet in Africa can be very variable. So Ghana, it's terrible. Well, certainly in the hotel I'm in Ghana, I can't do anything. But weirdly enough, in Nigeria, I can do a live stream from anywhere in the hotel. So we shall just have to see whether I'm in the mood to do it tomorrow and whether the internet will allow me to. But so thank you to everybody. So thank you to everybody who, there was a raid right at the beginning. So thank you to everybody who visited from the raid. Thank you to everybody who interacted with. So obviously Angel Faye, Itanchi, Summer Faye. There's been a few of you today actually. Angthays, Mama Rednax, yeah. Thank you very much for joining me. And as I say, I don't think it'll be as long this time before I'm back again, but it probably won't be until, where are we now? It's Friday now, so I'm working Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It probably won't be till Monday, maybe, because we finish work at 7 in the morning, so there's a chance I'll have a rest and then be in the mood to do it later. Or not. Podcast will be back tomorrow, even if I'm not back on the stream, and I will talk about the targets I'm going to set myself for June. I have, by the skin of my teeth, hit my target for this month. So my target for this month was to get up to chapter 20 signed off. Now the reality is, if I hadn't had the sort of miserable phase in the middle of the month, I would have got a lot more than that done, because I was pretty much there on the 15th, 16th. But, you know, it is what it is. So, yes, I think I'm not going to set myself a massively difficult target for next month. Also, I'm working all month. But we shall see how it goes. Anyway, thank you for watching. I will be back when I'm back. As I say, Monday or Tuesday, I would imagine. Okay, thank you for watching. Thank you, everyone. Take care. I am really going now. Bye-bye.